I don't work nights anymore, but for years I worked the night shift in a residential care facility. On weekends, I was the only person in charge of a dementia facility. It was sometimes spooky, consisting of 15 residents and only me to keep an eye on them all throughout the night. Around 3 a.m. in the morning, after doing an intentional round where I checked on all the residents and they were safe and well, I heard the doorbell ring. I got a sudden wave of goosebumps because this was a secure facility and it was the middle of the night. I went and looked out of the window, but there was nobody there. I blew it off as being a hallucination because I was exhausted most of the nights. About 10 minutes later, the doorbell rang again, so I went back to the window and checked again. Nobody was there, but I looked across the street and a strange car was parked there. I took a photo of it just in case, and then I went back to my station where I had been playing a game of cards with a delightful but very demented lady. I sat down and she looked at me and said, "What did the gentleman want, dearie?" Chills went down my spine, but I brushed it off because hallucinations are common with dementia, and this lady is particularly prone to not being oriented to time and place. However, the doorbell rang again less than 5 minutes later, and this time I was getting scared. Another one of my residents was awake and walking in the hallway, painting with a clean paintbrush to keep him occupied. I passed him on the way to the front window, and he turned to me and said, "Don't answer the door alone, he might hurt you," before continuing to pretend to paint. I looked out of the window to see the same car as before, and as I was looking around, I saw a shadow moving in front of the door. A person walked around the corner and then looked straight into the window next to me. We made direct eye contact, and it was essentially a jump scare for me, so I was startled and screamed. My residents started freaking out, and the guy on the other side of the door ran away. I called the police, and they showed up shortly after. It was straight chaos at that point, because I had 15 residents who all had been woken by the commotion, and 2 police officers in the building now also. Eventually, with the help of the 2 kind officers, I was able to get everybody settled down, but it took a while. I eventually learned from the cops that there was a woman down the road whose house was broken into. She was attacked in bed by someone who ransacked her house looking for drugs. I can't help but wonder if it was the same person from earlier that night intentionally trying to get into my facility for the drugs that are kept there. I'm grateful that our whole facility was so secure, and apparently the culprit just took the next best option. A strange part of the story that I'll never understand is how 2 of my patients knew that there was a man out there who wanted to enter and potentially hurt me. They were never close enough to the door to look out of the window and see anyone. It feels like one of those eerie guardian angel moments, or just a strange coincidence. I left that job not long after because they refused to hire a second person to work the nights, despite being understaffed according to best practice guidelines. I worked at a water treatment plant on the graveyard shift. The place was isolated, situated next to a highway that connected 2 cities about an hour apart. Nothing but some empty fields and trees were in between. It would just be me there during the night shift. My job, and why I had to be there, was to check the levels, adjust equipment every now and then, and basically just make sure that everything was working and it wasn't going to blow up. During my shift, I would be inside an 8-foot-tall barbed wire fence which was locked, but the access door to the rest of the facility were always open. One night at about 2:30 or 3 a.m., I was sitting in my control room area killing time on my Nintendo DS. The sound of the game was the only thing breaking the silence, and I was halfway zoning out when I heard a voice from behind me. The voice shouted out to get on the ground. I turned around and saw a guy standing there behind me holding a gun. He must have climbed the barbed wire fence to get to me, because I could see he was bleeding from several locations on his body. I must have been taking a while to comprehend what was happening, because the man yelled to get on the ground again. I didn't hesitate this time, and I dropped to my knees. He kept the gun pointed at me as he stepped closer. I remember that he kept apologizing to me, saying that he was sorry, but he had to do this. I thought that maybe he had been hired to kill me by someone, and what could I have possibly done to deserve this? He began asking for my truck keys, my wallet, and my phone. I didn't argue, and I handed everything over. Next, he tied me up. He used some duct tape that was near my desk, wrapping it around my wrists and my ankles. I still had no idea if I was going to die soon, or maybe I was being kidnapped and that's why he was tying me up. After a few minutes, the guy backed away. He apologized again, and then he turned and walked out of the room. I heard the sound of my truck starting up, and then the tires crunching the gravel as he drove away. For a moment, I just sat there, totally in shock, trying to calm myself down. The duct tape wrapped around my wrists and ankles wasn't the greatest, and I was able to free myself after a while. I used the emergency phone at the water treatment facility and called the police, and they said they would send someone right away. When the cops came, they asked me a bunch of questions, wrote down everything I could remember, and arranged for a way home for me. The next day, I found out the guy was arrested in the town over. He'd apparently escaped from an inmate custody transport a few days before, and had been on the run ever since. The police said he was desperate, probably running out of options, and that he had likely walked a long way to get to the water plant. That made sense, considering how far in the middle of nowhere the plant was. I even got all my stuff back besides the cash in my wallet, because he had been caught trying to pawn off my stuff in the next town over. I think about that night often, and have had to go to some therapy for it. The man was obviously desperate, and maybe he had thought about killing me, since it would likely have given him more time to escape, as the cops would have been called much later. There have been some other strange occurrences that happened while I was working the night shift job, but this one was easily the scariest thing that I ever experienced there. Many years ago, I used to work a night shift at a hotel in South Carolina. During the summer season, it wasn't so bad, mostly families. We had on-site security during the summer also. However, the winter months were different. The cheap weekly rates we'd offer attracted a lot of creepy people. The idea was to make money in the off-season by renting to what is known as snowbirds, older retired people who come to the beach for a month or so through the winter. It did not always work out that way though. The cheap rates made it possible for less than desirable people to become long-term residents. I've discovered more than my fair share of meth labs, broken up physical assaults, and more during the winter months. Working the night shift, I would meet some interesting people. I have a lot of stories from the night shift, but this one is the one that stands out because it did not end well for me. I began working at midnight and hung out with my friend Andrew. Andrew worked late-night maintenance shifts at this hotel and 2 other hotels that our company owned. He would regularly stop by after work and go grab us some food, and we'd hang out and talk since business was so slow. We had just ordered food, and he was getting ready to leave and go pick it up. I was just walking into the office to grab some money from my wallet to give it to Andrew when I heard the doorbell indicating a customer had entered. I had just come back and reached the doorway back to the lobby area when I saw Andrew just fall down in front of me. Next thing I knew, a guy walked around the corner and punched me in the head with a short steel pipe in his hand. It staggered me and I went on one knee. He hit me in the head with the pipe, and the only thing I remember was his partner saying that Andrew got away and found a cop, so they had to go now. I was finally able to get to my feet from the blow I received. I tried to call the police from the phone in the back office, but it was having issues. I slammed it in frustration. I was hurt, scared, and really freaking out. I realized they could come back, so I ran to lock the door. I don't know where Andrew had gone, and that worried me. I finally got the phone to work, and I told the 911 operator that I had been attacked, and I needed an officer and an ambulance. I didn't unlock the front door until the cops and ambulance pulled up. It was at this time, after I found out they punched and knocked him down, that Andrew had been able to amazingly jump over the desk and escape. He luckily ran outside as a cop was driving by, which he ran to flag down for help. I ended up in the hospital ER where I had to have 10 staples in my head, and they gave me morphine for pain. I thought I had only been hit in the head once after being punched, but I was later shown the video from the hotel cameras, and the video showed a different story. After I went to one knee, the guy hit me not just one time, but 10 total times. I kept trying to grab the pipe and get up for some reason. I do not remember any of this happening. He kept punching me and hitting me with the pipe until his accomplice told me that Andrew got away and flagged down a cop. We never found out why they chose to attack me. The police thought it might be a failed robbery attempt due to Andrew getting away and me not just going down. The only other explanation I could think of was someone was getting revenge on me for one of the many incidents I had to deal with while working the night shift. For example, maybe someone was getting back at me for a physical assault that I broke up in a room, or the meth labs I had discovered. Once I recovered, I came back to work the night shift for a bit, but I had PTSD and was very nervous it might happen again, so I ended up finding a different job. They never caught the guys who did it as far as I know. I used to work night shifts at this large manufacturing facility. The night shift consisted of a very small crew, including 5 security workers and 5 of us doing administration and packing. As administration staff, I sat with security as they'd switch between patrolling and monitoring the cameras. It was usually silent and boring. One night near Halloween, I was halfway into my shift on my lunch hour break. It was chilly, and I went to my car to grab my bigger jacket and have a smoke break. I was right outside the back door where this fence is closest to the building. It's maybe 10 yards off the back door. The only light was motion activated, and I had to keep making grand arm movements to keep it on. It's all grass and shadows up to the fence, and the light doesn't really hit that far. I was watching videos on my phone, and the light went out from a lack of motion. I sat in the dark a bit, sipping my coffee and finishing my cigarette. As I was finishing, I reached up and waved to activate the light to find the ashtray, but as the light flickered on, I heard a noise on the fence across from me. We do get some animals out there, and they could get startled, but as I stood up, I heard the fence keep slightly jiggling. When I looked up, I didn't see much. The light didn't really illuminate much outside its circle on the ground. My first thought was to say hello, which I did in a questioning tone. When I spoke, the sound stopped for a moment. I squinted into the darkness trying to adjust, but it was hard with the light on. However, once the light turned off again, the light from the moon had a little bit more effect lighting up the area. The fence started jiggling again. As my eyes adjusted better, I saw movement. It looked like a person opposite me at the fence fidgeting with the links. I thought this must be a kid just trying to spook us. Maybe they were going to break in and explore, which some kids had done before without knowing the building never closed. But it wasn't common, and this was one person, alone. I was worried, so I radioed to desk security with my walkie-talkie. I informed security that we had a visitor outside the fence on the north end of the building. I've seen the monitors of camera feed, and I know this area is totally covered by cameras. They would be able to check the fence clearly. My walkie beeped back, and the security guy said, "We aren't reading any movement at the fence. Is it in the tree line?" I responded back no, and they were fiddling with the fence right in front of me. The next events all happened so fast. Security didn't even have the chance to reply to me when from the fence, I heard this massively louder thrash of the lynx, and all I saw was a figure full-on sprinting at me. I spilled my coffee all over as I rushed back inside the building. I pushed myself inside and held the knob in place, trying to keep the deadbolt in place. The knob was flicking down hard against my hold. I could hear and feel something moving against the opposite side of the door. By the time security got down to me, I had the deadbolt in place, and the knob of the door was still now. I didn't understand why the security workers weren't taking me seriously while I explained the story, until I saw the playback from the cameras. It was just me outside. There was nothing there. I immediately thought this was a big prank on me, but everyone else genuinely thought that I was the one fooling them. Upon watching the footage a second time more closely, however, we noticed the way the door handle kept moving even when I removed my hand from it. Both the inside camera and outside caught it. We also noticed right before I panicked and turned to run inside, the fence made a slight jolt as if it was pushed. There were no holes in the fence or any kind of cuts made where somebody could squeeze through. There were no creepy shadows or unexplained wisps of smoke or light or movement besides those. Nobody there wanted to admit anything happened to me. Everyone came up with logical explanations like it was tricks of the moonlight, an overactive imagination, or too much coffee. I didn't want to argue about it. They already thought that I was being weird about it. I went about finishing my shift, but nobody used the back door again that night, and it remained locked. The longest employed security employee was finishing up his shift at the desk with me in the office that night. A few minutes before clocking out, he cleared his throat and told me, "I never really liked that north end. It feels like someone's eyes are always on me." It's honestly the most he's ever said to me in the years plus I worked there, the most I ever heard him say. I felt like the statement held even more weight from that alone. I worked there another 7 months and never had another incident. I never actually went out there again though. I stopped smoking, took my breaks out in the lobby, or wasted time chatting with coworkers. I made any excuse not to go out by that door again. I've never before or since had any moments where I felt like my imagination got the better of me, and I truly believe that wasn't the case here. I keep thinking back to that door handle jerking down when I was not touching it anymore. That had to be proof I wasn't imagining the whole thing. I worked overnight at a Subway inside a 24-hour truck stop, which wasn't the most glamorous job, but it kept the bills paid. Most of the time, it was quiet, especially after the regular truckers had eaten and left for the night. I was behind the counter one night, cleaning up some stuff, when this guy came in. He was just standing there staring at the menu, and then he asked me if I had a sandwich for him. At first, I thought he might have called in an order or something, so I asked him his name to look it up. That's when he stepped forward a bit, and I saw that he was covered in blood, soaked through his shirt, splattered his jeans, and dripping onto the floor. It was dark in the store, and I didn't realize how bad it was until I saw the red. It wasn't a little bit either. He was really covered in it. I froze for a second, and then he told me that I didn't need to know his name and to just make him a sandwich. I didn't want the guy to panic, so I tried to stay calm and think of the best way to notify someone. While making his sandwich, I thought of an excuse to go to the back of the store, saying that I needed to get more lettuce since the bin was almost done. I signaled to my other coworker who was relaxing in the back before her shift started to go get the off-duty state trooper who worked security around that time. A few minutes later, I saw the trooper finally coming into the store as I was finishing up with the man's sandwich. The trooper saw the trail of blood on the floor and the guy's stare, and it was obvious that something was seriously wrong. He must have had years of experience with things like this, because he moved in slow and steady, pretending he was just there for a sandwich, and got close. But the second he got close, the guy tensed up like he was about to bolt. The trooper stepped forward and grabbed him as the guy tried to pull away, but the trooper was faster. The man covered in blood was arrested and then questioned. The guy had been stabbed, but he didn't even know how bad it was because he was in shock. Apparently, he'd stabbed someone to death earlier that night, and the shock he had made him so disoriented he didn't even realize how badly he was bleeding. He had been driving around, gassing up his car at the pump just a few feet away, and getting food to go on the run. He was just some guy who walked in wanting a sandwich, acting like it was no big deal while covered in blood after a murder. It was a chilling experience for me having to deal with something like that while working a night shift job. Back in the 90s when I was in high school, I was very good with my hands and worked jobs like construction, demolition, flooring, and auto mechanics. One of the jobs I did was working for a guy doing remodeling projects, like at restaurants, bars, retail shops, and typical commercial projects. I went to school during the day, of course, and would sometimes work after school or weekends. For the guy I worked for, it wasn't uncommon for him to leave me alone at a site and have a list of things for me to do alone, mostly demolition work. He picked me up one Saturday morning as I didn't have a car or license yet, so he would pick me up and drive me to sites for work and then leave me alone there. I rarely worked with his other crews as they were the more skilled laborers, so I would tear up the place before the main crew would come in and do all the remodeling. Here's the part that was my major downfall to this story. I didn't pay attention to where we were going. I was too busy talking to him, and I think we were talking about cars or something. It took a long time to get to the site, and as we drove up, it was in the middle of nowhere in the Mojave Desert. I knew we left the highway and went down a few other 2-lane highways for a long distance, but I had no idea where we were. I had a big jug of water with me because the water to the house I would be working at was off. When we pulled up to the house, I pulled all my tools out of the truck before he left, and he then drove to another site that he would be working on. He told me that he would be back to pick me up at about 5 or 6 p.m., since it should only take me until then to do what I needed to do. That was always his way of saying, I'm only paying you till this time, so you better get everything done by then. It was never unfair, and we always had a good understanding on time and tasks. He drove away, and I was at this property all alone. I walked into the house, and it was mostly empty. My job was to remove all the remaining furniture, contents, and appliances, remove all the flooring, gut the kitchen and bathroom, and remove all the wood paneling. I was used to being on sites alone and working all night, and this was in the daytime on a Saturday, but the house kind of gave me the spooks. The house was old, dark, musty, and kind of cool inside, the kind of cool that gives you the goosebumps. I started removing all the junk from the house as I normally did on a project. I tore up all the flooring next, and to my delight, everything seemed to come up with ease, and it was rip, cut, and toss. I took a big demo hammer to the kitchen and tore it apart in less than an hour. I ended up using the big jug of water that my boss had given me to wash my hands and face periodically, so by late afternoon, I was down to my last drink and had already ate everything I brought. No worries though, because I would be getting picked up in a couple of hours. I finished all my tasks and even swept the entire place so the next crew could get right to work later that week. At that time of year when I was out there, it wasn't a typical hot desert day, but you know in the desert, as soon as the sun goes down, it starts to cool rapidly. I had a flannel shirt, but that wasn't enough, and it was starting to get dark. My ride was running late, so all I could do was wait. This was the time before cell phones were common, and there was no electricity, water, or phone service in the house. I climbed up to get to the top of the roof of the house to get a better look to see if I could see something in the distance. Miles down a smaller road, I saw a few homes, but those homes were all dark. My first thought was to hike down to a neighbor's house and ask them to use a phone. I didn't want to leave though, in fear of missing my ride, especially since it didn't look like anyone was home since no lights were on in any houses. I started to think about my options as darkness approached fast. My options were either to stay at the house until morning, hike what little water I had a few miles in the desert at night, or wait until early morning and hike out there to some sort of civilization. I decided my best option was to just stay and hope that my ride would show up. It also suddenly occurred to me that no one knew where I was except my boss. I don't know if he told anyone else where I was either. My family wouldn't miss me until maybe Sunday night because they knew me and how much I would work, and they never worried about me not coming home. As full darkness was all around me, I didn't have a flashlight or any way to make a fire, but luckily the moonlight was bright. It was getting cold outside, so I went back inside the empty, creepy house that somehow seemed even more creepy when mostly empty. At about 8 p.m., the batteries on my radio, which was my only source of a little light and noise, started to die. I grabbed an old wooden chair and just sat in the living room of this house doing absolutely nothing except waiting. I started to hear the wind and odd noises, which I assumed were animals in the distance. I started to shiver from the cold, and my mind might have started to play tricks on me. I saw shadows moving outside and inside the house. I also started to hear someone talking, like whispers or something. I was sure I was going crazy and got up from my chair and yelled out hello, and just as I did, I heard something fall on the other side of the house. I had enough of this creepy house, so I went to go outside again. At least in the moonlight I could see better. Off in the distance I heard noises and saw movement, but couldn't make out anything. I had a pile of tools by the edge of the house ready for when my boss picked me up, so I ran over there and grabbed a heavy pry bar. I was ready to defend myself for whoever was out there. I had to keep moving, because my undershirt and flannel shirt were not enough to keep me warm. The wind was also starting to pick up, and as far as I could see, there was no lights around me. I didn't want to try to make it up on the house again out of fear of falling in the dark, but I got up on top of the gate just to try to gain a little bit of height to see if I could see some house lights nearby or car lights. My mind went to the stories that circled around at the time, about people who would come up to the Mojave Desert and bury bodies, how there were evil groups out here, and how people would go missing for no reason. Every noise had me on edge, and every shadow had my heart pounding. I knew no one was in the house, but I was sure I could hear noises from inside. I huddled up on the front porch for warmth, looking in the living room window, expecting to see someone at any moment. By around 11 p.m., I looked at my watch, thinking this was going to be a long night, as all this stuff only happened since it got dark. I didn't know how I was going to make it for another 6 hours until daybreak. Closer to midnight, I was wide awake. My eyes were only fixed on the dirt road, thinking that any time now a car would come down and maybe they could help me. I remember casually turning around to look back to the house, because all this time I kept hearing noises, but I told myself it was a rat or some animal. I saw a shadow of a person moving from the kitchen to down the hall. I jumped up from sitting and started backing my way out of the porch away from the house. As I was backing up, I tripped over the debris pile and fell down on the ground. I tried to get up, but fell again. It was like something pushed me down, or my imagination, but all of a sudden these bright lights were coming closer to me as I was laying on the ground. I saw my boss standing above me with a flashlight, wondering what I was doing on the ground. I was just so glad to see him. I wasn't mad. I just asked him what happened. He said that he was sorry, but he thought the other crew was coming to get me, and they thought he was coming, so no one actually came. He said it wasn't until later in the evening he asked the other crew leader about how far along the house I had got, and that's when they realized I was still out there. My boss felt really bad and told me he was going to pay me for the entire time I was out there. As he was driving me home, I asked about the house and told him how creepy it was. He said he didn't have any information on the house and only just knew what we were supposed to do. I don't know if I was going delusional or something, but that time I spent out there by myself, lost in the middle of the desert at night, was the scariest night of my life. What was so weird is I never saw any headlights of a car approaching. My only memory of being rescued was seeing my boss standing over me with his flashlight. I'm not exactly sure what happened that night, but it was so creepy. After that, I made sure to always keep extra batteries, a flashlight, and double the amount of liquid with me.
I've been on the road for 12 hours straight, riding the line between exhaustion and hallucination when I first saw him. A lone figure on the shoulder, half illuminated by my high beams, thumb hanging out like he'd been carved into the desert night. The highway was nothing but a ribbon of black asphalt cutting through the scrub and the rock. No towns for miles. No reason for anybody to be out here. My first instinct was to keep driving. I've been warned far too many times. Don't pick up hitchhikers. But my guilt has a way of working its claws in. The longer I look at the figure shrinking in my rear view, the more it felt like I just left a body on the roadside. I don't know why I slowed, but I did. Tires humming against the asphalt as I pulled off onto the shoulder, gravel popping under the weight of my car. He jogged up, lanky and wiry, maybe in his mid-30s. Dirty jeans, canvas jacket, hair plastered to his forehead with sweat. When he opened up the door, I caught the sour smell of somebody who hadn't showered in definitely a few days, maybe more. He slid in without another word, clutching a ragged backpack up against his chest like it was the only thing anchoring him to earth. "Thanks," he muttered. "No problem," I said, putting us back on the road. "Where are you heading?" He glanced out the window, eyes scanning the darkness. "Gas station, just the next one." "Long way to be walking," I said, trying to keep the mood light. "Lucky I came through, huh?" He didn't laugh, he didn't even smile, he just kept staring off into the black desert. I figured maybe he was shy or strung out or maybe both. But a few miles later, I heard him muttering under his breath. Some kind of chant maybe. I looked over and saw his lips moving, eyes fixed on the side mirror. "You okay over there?" I asked. He blinked. "We're fine," he said. "Just keep driving. Don't slow down." That sank into me. Not the kind of thing you want to hear at 1 a.m. in the middle of nowhere with a stranger riding shotgun. "Don't slow down?" I asked. "They'll catch up if you do." His voice was calm, matter of fact, like he was telling me water was wet or the sky was blue. I gave him a nervous lap back. Who's gonna catch up?" But he didn't answer, just hugged that backpack tighter and kept looking out the window. I checked the mirror myself and my stomach knotted. A pair of headlights, distant, but they were gaining. I've been alone on the road for over an hour now, not a single car. Now suddenly there was somebody behind us. "That a friend of yours?" I asked. "No," he responded. "Just drive." I pressed the accelerator a little harder, engine whining as the speedometer climbed. The headlights behind us matched it perfectly. The car behind us stuck like glue. Every time I eased off the gas, its headlights swelled bigger in the mirror. When I pushed the pedal, it would match me, keeping just enough distance to make sure that my skin would crawl. I gripped the wheel tighter, my mouth was getting dry, while a stranger beside me muttered and clutched his backpack. "All right, you gonna tell me what's going on?" I snapped. His voice dropped. "They followed me. I got away, but they don't let people go. Nobody gets out. Not for free." "Okay, what do you mean they?" Then he turned to me, face pale in the glow from the dash. "Just keep driving." That wasn't an answer, at least not good enough for me. I tried telling myself it was a coincidence, that maybe it was just another innocent driver heading the same direction, but deep down, I think I knew better. It wasn't a coincidence. This was a pursuit. I flicked the headlights to high, leaning into the speed, 80, 85, 90. My tires buzzing against the asphalt, a low howl that made it feel like the car could lift off the road at any second. The headlights behind us grew smaller, then steadied, still keeping pace. "You're not gonna stop," that guy whispered. "Not till they have me back." I shot him another glance. His hands were trembling as they were clamped still over that backpack. What the hell's in there? "Proof." His eyes flashed in the dark. "Enough to ruin them. They can't let it get out." My blood iced over. I wanted to press for more, but there was a part of me that already knew the truth was probably uglier than I could actually stomach. Whoever these people were, they weren't just pissed off friends chasing down a runaway. It smelled bigger, dirtier. The road sign loomed up ahead of us, green letters shining gas, 15 miles. I clenched my jaw. 15 miles might as well have been 100 at this point. The car behind continued to inch closer, the glare of its high beams flooding my mirrors until I couldn't see a damn thing. The engine roared as it closed the gap. "Hold on," I barked over at him. They rammed us. Just a kiss at first. I shuddered through the frame of my car, enough to make the hitchhiker yelp. Then again a little harder, shoving us forward. My teeth rattled. I swerved, gripping the wheel like it was the only thing keeping me alive. "They're gonna force us off the road," he shouted. He was probably right, but all I could do was just brace for it. The highway curved left and I took it fast, the tires screaming against the pavement. The other car hung back for a breath, then lunged again, its headlights searing into my vision. I thought about letting him out, about slamming the brakes and tossing that stranger back on the road, handing him over to whatever nightmare he brought into my passenger seat. But I couldn't. It was too late for that now. I was in it. And then, blessed sight, the faint glow of lights on the horizon. The gas station. I floored it, praying the car wouldn't spin out before we actually made it. The station sat lonely in this island in the desert, buzzing neon signs and a couple of flickering lamps. No other cars, no other sign of life, just 4 pumps and a greasy little building squatting under the weight of the night. I slammed quickly into the lot, brakes damn near smoking, the smell of burnt rubber choking out in the air. The hitchhiker was out before we'd even fully stopped, immediately bolting for the door. I shouted at him to wait, but he was already gone, backpack slamming against his side as he sprinted inside. The other car peeled in behind us, engine growling, headlights snapping off, and for the first time I saw the shape of it, this old black sedan, windows tinted dark. The doors creaked open in unison. 2 men then stepped out, big blocky shoulders, work boots hitting the concrete with slow, heavy steps. They didn't rush, their confidence almost made my stomach turn again. One of them looked straight at me, a dead stare that pinned me to the seat. He then turned and followed that hitchhiker into the gas station. The other stayed outside, leaning up against the car, like a watchman. Now, I should have just driven off. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to floor it, get out of there, leave the stranger to whatever the hell he'd signed up for, but I sat there, frozen, my breath fogging up the windshield. My curiosity ended up being stronger than my fear, and maybe, just maybe, my guilt too. Through the door of the gas station, I could see the hitchhiker at the counter, shouting at the weary clerk. The man outside pulled something from his jacket, tucking it close to his leg. It had to be a gun. Now that broke the spell. I shoved my door open and staggered inside. My voice cracked. "Hey, what the hell's going on?" The one by the car turned his head slowly, like he couldn't believe I was dumb enough to step out. "Go home," he said, calm and quiet, the kind of voice that promised you didn't really want to hear it twice. But it was already too late. Inside the station, the hitchhiker ripped open his backpack, spilling out these papers and photos across the counter. The clerk's eyes went wide. He said something frantic. I couldn't quite hear it through the glass. Then the second man stormed in, shoving the man against the shelves. A soda display crashed to the floor, cans rolled everywhere. The hitchhiker's voice broke through the chaos, desperate. "Call the cops. Don't let them take me back." And for a split second, I thought maybe, just maybe, he'd actually be saved. Then the man with the gun raised it, leveled it, and everything froze. I couldn't breathe, I couldn't move, could only watch as the desert night pressed in around us. The ugly truth of what I'd stumbled into finally bared its teeth. The moment stretched like it was caught in amber, my eyes locked on the barrel of that gun, the way it glinted under those lights. The hitchhiker froze, one arm still clutching the counter, his mouth hanging open mid-plea. I wanted to move, I wanted to do something, yell, rush in, knock the gun aside like in the movies, but I was rooted to the pavement, hands trembling uselessly at my side. The man outside, the watchman, never even looked away from me. He didn't need to say another word. The message was carved in stone: stay put or join him. A thunderclap cracked inside the station. The clerk screamed. The hitchhiker dropped like his strings had been cut, a smear of red blooming across the tile. Papers scattered across the floor, photos of men in uniforms, documents stamped with logos that I couldn't quite read from where I was. Evidence, at least that's what he said. Evidence that would obviously never leave that counter. The shooter knelt, grabbed the backpack, stuffed the scattered proof back inside with cold efficiency, then stood and calmly strode for the door. The clerk stood frozen behind the register, hands covering her mouth, eyes huge. Our gazes locked for a quick second, and I'll never forget that look. She knew she just witnessed something that she would never unsee. The two men stepped back out into the night, one carrying the backpack, the other wiping his hands across his jacket, and then tossed another glance at me, almost like I was less than dirt. They got back in the sedan, doors shut with muffled thuds. The engine purred to life, then they were gone, taillights shrinking back out on the black highway, just like that. I stumbled inside. The clerk was shaking, tears streaking down her cheeks, staring at the body on the floor. We need to call somebody," I stammered out. "The cops?" She shook her head violently, eyes still really wild. "No, you don't understand. You didn't see them. You didn't see them." "But he's dead." She grabbed my wrist hard enough to hurt, nails digging deep. "Go, right now. Leave before they come back. Forget that you were ever here." I yanked free, but the look in her eyes was really enough. Terror, not of me, not even of the dead man bleeding in her linoleum, but of whoever those men really worked for. I backed out of the station. My car sat under those buzzing lights, engine still warm, door hanging open. I climbed back inside. The road ahead was empty again, my headlights carving out a narrow path, and I drove it like a man possessed, half expecting to see those same red taillights to reappear in my mirror now at any second. But they didn't. The highway gave me nothing but silence and distance. Hours later, when I finally hit the outskirts of the next town, I pulled into a diner lot and sat there until dawn, watching the sun crawl up over the desert. I called the police. How could I not? I made a report over the phone, and the dispatcher knew exactly what I was talking about. An officer met me at the diner an hour later to get some more details from me. It was some kind of ongoing murder investigation. I told him everything, especially about how the clerk told me to go. They said they were taking extra time to look into her as well. The vibe I got was that she was some kind of drug dealer of some kind, and the hitcher was involved with her. The cop left, and I was all alone. So I just sat there, silently, until the smell of coffee drifted out of the parking lot and the world started moving again like nothing had happened. And that's when I realized, whatever that man had been running from, it wasn't just his nightmare. He handed me a piece of it the second I let him into my car. We'd been on the road for 6 hours when I saw her. The four of us all packed into Josh's beat-up old Corolla, windows fogged from our breath, the smell of stale fries and gas station coffee turning the cabin quickly sour. College road trips always sounded better than they actually were. On paper, it was supposed to be freedom, music, inside jokes, but in reality, it was endless stretches of asphalt, cramped legs, and everybody getting irritable in waves. The highway dipped through a long stretch of pine, then spat us out by this old railroad crossing. And that's where she stood. A girl barefoot in the gravel, one arm hugging her stomach, the other stuck out half-heartedly in the universal pick-me-up gesture. Torn jeans, hoodie 2 sizes too big, hair knotted into greasy ropes. Josh was slowing down before anybody could say a word. Dude, what are you doing?" I asked him. "What? She looks like she needs help." He squinted through the windshield. "It's freezing out there." I don't care if it's freezing, man. This is how horror movies start." Sarah leaned forward from the back seat, voice soft. "Come on, she actually looks our age. Would you want to be left out here?" I'll admit that shut me up because no, I wouldn't, and I knew if I was stranded, I'd pray somebody with a shred of compassion would stop for me too. So Josh pulled over. The girl walked up, quite hesitant at first, then faster when she realized we weren't driving off. She bent down and peered into the window. Up close, she looked even worse. Her lips were pale, nose was red, eyes glassy with clear exhaustion. "You headed into town?" she asked. Her voice was rough, like she'd been screaming or crying recently. "Yeah," Josh said. "Hop in." She slid in the middle of the back seat, pressing close to Sarah. She smelled like sweat and dirt, that kind of dirty you can't really fake. She hugged herself tight and kept her eyes down. "Thanks," she whispered. "I just need a ride away from here." Nobody spoke for a moment. The only sound was the heater rattling weakly, trying to push back the chill. Finally, I cleared my throat. So what are you doing out here?" Her shoulders tensed. "Running." Running from what? It doesn't matter. She glanced up. The look in her eyes made me shut my mouth. It was wide, alert, scanning each of us like she was calculating whether we were a bigger threat than whatever she'd escaped from. Josh turned the music down. Where do you want us to drop you off? Just keep driving, she said. I'll tell you when. The four of us kind of exchanged confused looks, and nobody argued. I kept staring out the window as the pines thickened again, pressing close to the road. My stomach knotted. Something about the way she said running, not walking, not leaving, but running. It really was sticking with me. I didn't know it then, but letting her into the car meant that we'd already crossed a line that we could no longer come back from. The girl really didn't say much after that. She just stared out the window, hands buried deep in the sleeves of her hoodie, rocking slightly. Every once in a while, Sarah would try to strike up some kind of conversation. Where are you from? Do you need to call somebody? But the girl's answers were clipped and clearly evasive. Josh kept glancing at me in the passenger seat, his expression saying what we both were thinking. Maybe picking her up hadn't been such a great idea, but none of us had the guts to actually say it out loud. 20 minutes passed, then 30. No towns, no lights, just the highway. I finally turned around, trying to sound casual. You said you needed a ride into town, right? Which town? She blinked, like she hadn't really thought that far ahead. Just keep going. I'll know when. I didn't like that answer. Look, we can drop you off at a gas station or a diner or something, somewhere safe. Her eyes flicked to mine, very cold-like. I said, I'll tell you when. The way she said that sent a ripple through the car. Sarah leaned back, folding her arms. Evan, who'd been quiet the whole trip, finally muttered, creepy. Josh cleared his throat. All right, we're not gonna go too far off route though. We still got a long drive ahead of us. That's when she spoke up again. There's a shortcut up ahead. Turn right at the next dirt road. I frowned. Okay, shortcut to where exactly? To town. Her lips twitched into something that might have been a smile, though it never really reached her eyes. Josh's hands tightened on the wheel. I could see the hesitation clearly on him, but he was always too trusting in people. All right, I guess if it's quicker. The dirt road appeared out of the darkness, a thin strip vanishing into heavy woods. Josh turned onto it. Gravel pinged against the undercarriage. The headlights cut this narrow tunnel through the trees. Every nerve in my body was screaming that this is wrong. This isn't what we should be doing. We hadn't passed another car in an hour, and now we're leaving the only highway that actually might lead to somewhere. But the girl just leaned back in her seat, finally looking relaxed, and that really scared me more than anything else. See? She said. Told you. The deeper we went, the worse it continued to feel, though. No houses, no mailboxes, just trees and blackness. The dirt road narrowed rougher with every bend, until it felt less like a road now and more like a trail. Evan leaned forward between the seats. Dude, this is not a shortcut. There's no way. Josh slowed down a little. How much further? Not far, the girl responded back. I twisted in my seat to face her again. Look, I don't really know what's going on, but this doesn't feel right. Where exactly are you taking us? Almost there. Again, the way she talks, the way she said everything, it was really starting to terrify me. And then the first set of headlights appeared off in the trees to the left, half hidden, then another on the right. Parked vehicles, their shapes hulking in the dark. A pickup, an SUV, another car. My chest went cold. Josh, I said, turn around now. Before he could do much, the figures stepped out of the trees, 3, 4, 5 of them, shadows moving up the road, lit up in the headlights. Men, big men, their faces cast in shadow, but their posture said everything we needed to know. They'd been waiting for us. Josh slammed on the brakes. The car skidded to a stop, dust clouding the beams. The girl straightened up, suddenly more calm and collected. She looked at us, finally meeting each of our eyes in turn. Hey, thanks for the ride. she said. The doors opened and the men started toward us, slow and steady. One had a flashlight. Another held something heavier, maybe a pipe, maybe a bat. My stomach immediately flipped. Sarah gasped out loud. "Oh my God." Evan swore under his breath. "She set us up. She fucking set us up." Josh fumbled for reverse, tires spinning as the car jerked backwards. The men then surged forward, shouting, hands pounding on the hood. One yanked at the driver's handle. Another pounded the glass by my head. "Go, go!" I screamed. Josh floored it. The Corolla jolted backward, swerving off the road and then into a ditch. The bumper slammed hard into the dirt, and the tires squealed as he fought for the wheel. One of the men slipped in front of us, and Josh swerved again, missing him only by inches. The girl didn't move. She sat perfectly still, hands folded in her lap, watching us like we were nothing more than a delivery that had arrived early. We hit the dirt road again, fishtailing. The men shouted, one of them running after us for a few yards before fading off into the dark. The headlights of the parked vehicle snapped on, and the engines roared to life. "They're coming," Sarah said. I twisted in my seat. Sure enough, beams of lights were cutting through the dust, bearing down fast. Josh was white-knuckling the wheel. "Hold on," he barked. The Corolla screamed down the trail, bouncing over ruts, barely holding together. The trees whipped past in a blur. My heart was currently in my throat, waiting for the moment one of those bigger trucks to ram us from behind, flip us back into a ditch. But somehow, by some miracle, we burst back out onto the highway. The other vehicles didn't seem to be following either. We drove in silence, every one of us heaving for breath, hearts pounding like war drums. Nobody dared to speak, not even Sarah this time. Finally, I turned around, and the backseat was empty. The girl was gone. The silence in the car was heavier than anything I've ever felt. All four doors were locked. Engine was screaming down a highway, but the space between Sarah was now empty. The hoodie, the bare feet, the sour smell, gone, like she'd never even been there. Josh's voice cracked. "Where the fuck did she go?" "She was just right," Sarah stammered out, spinning around, her hand patting the seat like the girl might have slipped under it somehow. "She was just here." "No fucking way," Evan muttered, shaking his head. His face was ghost white. "No way. She got out back there. She must have, when the guys were on us." But I was watching. I saw her sitting perfectly still, hands folded. She hadn't moved a muscle when we tore out of that trap. There hadn't been time for her to jump out. No chance she could have slipped free without us noticing it. But she must have, right? "Look, it doesn't matter how, she's gone now, and we need to keep driving." Josh didn't argue with me. He pushed the car a little harder. None of us looked back, terrified we'd see those headlights flaring up in the distance again. It wasn't until nearly an hour later, when the lights of a real town finally glowed on the horizon, that anybody spoke up. Sarah's voice was barely audible. She wasn't running from anyone. And we all know she was right. She didn't need saving. She'd been bait, dangled out there like meat on a hook, waiting for some bleeding heart idiot to scoop her up and deliver her straight to the jaws of whatever the hell operation those men were running. We rolled into town just after dawn, pulling into a diner lot like survivors. We didn't even go inside, we just sat there, faces pale, eyes empty. I kept thinking about her last words when she was in the car. Almost there. She hadn't been talking about any town. She'd been talking about the trap, and we'd driven her right to it. Even now, years later, when I pass a lone hitchhiker on some forgotten back road, I grip the wheel and keep driving because I know better. Some people aren't running from danger. Some people are the danger. I'm not the kind of person who chases chaos. I like schedules, clean bathrooms, defined plans. But my husband Barry's a little looser with things. He'd pack a bag the morning of a flight, if I let him. But he's always been respectful of my needs for order. That's what made this whole trip feel like such a slap. We weren't flying cross-country or off-grid camping. Literally just a 3-hour drive out of the city, a little town built around a couple of lakes and creeks. The kind of place you forget existed until you scroll past some kind of aerial drone shot on social media and think to yourself, yeah, I could use a long weekend. So we did it the right way. Barry picked the destination. I booked the place. One of those Airbnbs that looked a little too perfect. Bright white interior, Edison bulb lighting, and a fire pit in the backyard. It said it was walking distance to the river. Sounds good. I cross-checked the references, verified the host profile, and made sure the lockbox code had come through properly. The booking confirmation said it had been recently cleaned and was fully reset for our arrival. That was the last phrase they used, reset, like we were loading into some digital hotel room and didn't remember the last guest. The drive-in was easy, mostly two-lane roads and flat farmland broken up by little clusters of trees. There were actual cows out there. We stopped at this diner around 15 minutes from the house and had soup and grilled cheese, like we were retirees, just to buy ourselves time until the official check-in window had arrived. When we finally pulled up into the neighborhood, it was a lot quieter than I expected it to be. No kids on bikes, nobody out mowing their lawn or washing their car. And the house itself sat at the far end of the cul-de-sac, boxed in by tall hedges and a rickety wooden fence in the backyard. The first thing that I noticed was the car. Not the one we drove in with, but the other one parked at the curb. Sleek, silver, clearly newer than anything else on that street. The hood was dusted over though, and pine needles were stuck to the windshield like nobody had even bothered to move it in days. I remember saying, "Do you think somebody's still here?" Barry just shrugged and got out to stretch. I didn't like that. I don't shrug things off like that either. I'd triple check a locked door before bed if I heard a single creak from the HVAC. I pulled up the app and clicked through the reservation. Everything looked right. Dates, address, check-in instructions. I even had a backup email from the host with a note about the key being inside the lockbox. Still, I called customer service just to be sure, and after a brief hold, the woman on the line told me everything had been confirmed. The host had supposedly cleared the place out earlier in the week, and sometimes people just leave their cars behind if they get picked up. Barry was already halfway to the porch by the time I hung up my phone. The lockbox clicked open without any kind of fight. Inside was a single brass key, old school, a little tarnished around the ridges. Barry held it up like he just won a prize and then slipped it into the knob. The front door creaked inward, revealing a tastefully decorated living room, neutral tones, abstract wall art, and one of those fake fireplaces with glowing logs. It looked like it was designed to look clean, without any kind of personality. And at first glance, it did look exactly like the pictures I saw before. Still, I stepped in slowly. The air wasn't stale exactly, but it wasn't fresh either. Like somebody had opened up all the windows earlier in that day and then shut them again just before we arrived. Barry walked in, called out a friendly hello, like we were visiting old friends or something. Of course, there was no answer, just the gentle hum of a ceiling fan and the faint click of a wall clock. We brought in our bags and cooler, moving room from room. Kitchen, dining area, guest room, and bathroom. It all looked fine. I kept waiting for something to jump out though. Clothes on the floor, dishes in the sink, a door that wouldn't open. But it was quiet. But there was just something about it, something gnawing at me. The staging felt far too perfect, like it had been reconstructed, not just cleaned. But I tried to shake the thought. Barry lugged the cooler into the kitchen while I wandered down the hallway. He called for me a minute later, voice sharp. Babe, you gotta see this. I came back and found him standing with the fridge door wide open. Inside, it wasn't empty, not even close. It was packed full. Milk, deli meat, a full vegetable crisper, beer, a wrapped cheesecake on the top shelf, and everything was fresh. I leaned in and checked the labels. Nothing was expired. Somebody had stocked this fridge within the last few days. "This isn't ours, is it?" Barry said, though of course I knew it wasn't. "Did you order groceries?" "No," I said. "And this isn't leftover from the guests. There's no way this stuff would still be good." I pulled out my phone and wrote to the backup Airbnb contact that I'd been given, the real-time guest liaison or whatever they called themselves. I told them about the fridge. 15 minutes later, I got a reply and said, "Oh no, Thanks for letting us know. It was an honest mistake. Owner must have left it by accident. Home is definitely vacant though. You're all clear to settle in. Enjoy your stay." No apology, just that vague, breezy dismissal. Barry then cracked open a soda from the fridge because of course he would, and then went to get the bags from the car. I stayed behind and wandered to the bathroom. It was clean, like everything else. Queen bed made tight, suitcase stand folded in the corner, lamp on the nightstand. The adjoining bathroom was lit by one high-frosted window and smelled faintly of lemon cleaner. That's when I noticed the medicine bottles on the back of the toilet. 6 orange prescription containers lined up in a row. I stepped in and picked one up. Hydrocodone, 10 milligrams. But the name was smudged. The date was only a week old though. The others were similar: painkillers, anti-nausea, sleeping aids. Next to them sat a manila envelope thick with paperwork. I slid the top open and saw forms from a regional cancer center. Billing information, treatment plans, chemo schedules, home care notes, radiation prep. I flipped through, my gut turning tighter and tighter. These weren't old papers, they were active, ongoing. "Barry!" I called out. And that's when I heard him scream. It was short and panicked, not drawn out. A gut-level sound that ripped me away from the sink and then down the hall. I followed the sound to the master bedroom where Barry stood frozen just inside the doorway. I pushed past him and stopped cold. There was a body on the carpet. Male, adult, face down. The skin was gray-green and sloughing in places. The stench hit me like a wet rag. Not quite rot, but the early oily phase of decomposition. Metallic, sour, unmistakable. His fingers were curled like claws, arms stretched downward towards the door, as if he was trying to drag himself out. His clothes were damp with old sweat and waste. The back of his shirt was soaked through and stained with a deep maroon where he apparently had leaked out while lying there. One leg was twisted unnaturally beneath him, like it had just given out halfway through the crawl. Barry backed out of the room gagging, and I just stood there, staring, because the rest of it was falling into place in my head. The full fridge, the medicine, the car out front. The Airbnb confirmation that the host had cleared out the week prior. He didn't leave, I said aloud, now numb. He was always still here. Barry didn't answer me. He was halfway in the hallway now, bent over and dry heaving. I stepped in carefully and skirted around the mess on the floor, checked the dresser. It was still full of clothes, men's underwear, socks, folded t-shirts. The nightstand had a charger plugged in. His wallet was open next to a glass of water. I didn't touch it, but I could see his license through the little plastic flap. Same last name as the booking. This was the host, the guy who'd supposedly cleaned the house before we got there. Only he never finished. He died doing it. I turned and followed Barry back down the hall. He was already on the phone with the Airbnb again, pacing in the living room, trying to stay calm but quickly unraveling with every single breath. "Yeah, we just found a body. No, a body. It's in the house you said was clean and empty. No, this isn't like the fridge. This is a man's corpse literally rotting in the back bedroom." I stood in the middle of the kitchen and just stared at the counter, willing my thoughts to line up. The fridge, the prescriptions, the car, the fact that somebody approved our stay without ever even physically checking the property. The fact that we've been dismissed twice by customer service people who clearly didn't verify a fucking thing. There was no malice or conspiracy, just negligence, the kind that gets people hurt. The police showed up maybe 30 minutes later. 2 cruisers, no lights or sirens. The first officer to enter took one breath inside the master bedroom, then doubled back with a hand over his nose. They asked us to step outside, so we stood by our car in the gravel drive, while a paramedic team suited up to examine the body. I think Barry smoked 3 cigarettes in a row and didn't speak the whole time. I just stood there holding my phone, staring at the unread messages piling up from the Airbnb rep, who suddenly had gone very quiet once the words police and dead body were mentioned to them. An older detective arrived not long after, lean and very deliberate, gray mustache and mirrored sunglasses. He spoke to me first. "Do you know the deceased, ma'am?" he asked me. "No," I said. We were renting the place. He was supposed to be gone. The company told us the house had already been cleaned and the owner had vacated the property. He raised his eyebrow. You ever been here before? No. You touch anything? I hesitated. I moved some papers in the bedroom. They looked like treatment forms for cancer. He made some kind of note, and I watched his team bring out the body in a zipped black bag, the outline barely resembling the man that we found face down on that carpet. The smell didn't disappear. It seemed to hang over the driveway like smoke itself, a smell that would soak into our clothes, into our luggage, and into our memories. They questioned Barry next, and his answers seemed to be shorter than mine, or clipped. They asked us to give a formal statement at the station, but they could also tell that we were shaken up, so they offered to let us go after taking photos of our IDs and then verifying our reservation. We left, and the detective said something strange before we did. We had no reports of this man missing, no wellness checks, nobody called. As far as anybody's concerned, he was still alive until you opened up that front door. I nodded but didn't say what I was thinking. He probably had nobody left to check on him. We drove to the nearest Super 8, about 15 minutes outside of town. The lobby smelled like disinfectant and vending machine coffee. Barry didn't say anything until we were lying in the stiff queen bed with the TV on mute, and our shoes still on. What if we hadn't gone into that room? He asked. What if we just spent the weekend there? Slept next door while he was rotting down the hall? I didn't answer because I already knew. The next morning, I got an email from the Airbnb apologizing for the inconvenience and assured me that the matter had been escalated to the safety response team. Our entire trip had been refunded. They even offered us a free future stay. I deleted that email without saying anything in response, and then quickly deleted the app. I flew out for a tech conference, but if I'm being honest, the real plan was to stretch it into a little coastal vacation. Conference stuff was 3 days long, but I took 6 off total, with the back half of the trip wide open. No meetings, no emails, just sun and some space. It was February in New York, and I was sick of stepping over black slush and dodging subway coughs. I needed a reset. The Airbnb was a modern bungalow just outside of LA, Venice adjacent, they called it. Little house tucked between bigger ones, right near the beach. Photos showed some hardwood floors, a full kitchen, sleek appliances, 1 queen bed, and a desk by a picture window. I figured it was the perfect base. I'd hit the panels and break out sessions, maybe network a little, then disappear into the boardwalk crowd and get a few drinks, talk to some women, hubba hubba, maybe take 1 or 2 back if the vibe was right. Row. When I landed at LAX, everything ran smoothly. The Uber picked me up at the curbside. Nice driver, knew the shortcuts. The check-in instructions were detailed and easy. Lockbox by the side gate, code included in the app, key inside. I got in around 2 in the afternoon. The place looked just like the photos, clean, bright, and smelled like fresh paint and citrus. I unpacked right away because I always do that. Call it compulsive, but I like knowing where my stuff is. I had a roller bag and a backpack, both of which I emptied into drawers and closets within the next 10 minutes. My laptop and camera went on the desk. My wallet, keys, and conference badge landed on the kitchen counter. I noticed there was no other personal clutter, no toothbrushes, no coats hanging near the door, no signs that anybody lived here. But that's the way I like it. I mean, I'm renting the place, not borrowing somebody's house. Those next few days were pretty normal. I hit the conference early, came back late, slept like the dead. I took a few photos of the beach at sunset, even got a few compliments on my camera gear. But on the 3rd day, once the conference was almost over and my schedule loosened up, I started noticing these little things. Doors ajar that I already closed, stuff out of place. I quickly told myself that I was imagining it, but I wasn't. Something was not right in that house. I started with the bathroom door. I remember closing it after my shower, habitual, because I didn't want the steam to escape. I had some shirts hanging in there. But when I came back later that night to brush my teeth before bed, it was now standing wide open. Not halfway, not nudged open. Open, fully. I chalked it up to some kind of draft. The place did have a lot of windows, and I'd had the front one cracked earlier, so that had to be it. But then it was the bedroom closet, and I never used those things. It was too easy to forget things in a rush. Still, one morning after a walk on the beach, I came back and noticed that bifold door pushed in slightly, like somebody had just slipped in to grab a jacket. I didn't even want it open at first. I just stared at it for a while, then slowly pulled the doors apart. Nothing inside, just my luggage, zipped up and right where I left it. But all of this had started to get in my head. That night, I found the peanut butter jar sitting out on the counter, lid open, spoon right next to it. I hadn't eaten any. I hadn't even touched the thing since I unloaded my groceries. And that's when I got the feeling. The one that you get when you know, not think, know somebody's been in your stuff. The next day, I took photos of everything before I left. Wide shots of every room, time-stamped as well. I even arranged a few things in deliberate ways. A folded dish towel on the oven handle. My charger coiled up just so on the nightstand. I went out for lunch and checked the photos when I got back. Sure enough, the towel was now different, sloppier. The charger was uncoiled and rewrapped in this totally different loop. The peanut butter jar was now in the pantry, not the fridge. I stood in the kitchen for a long time, and the silence was wrong. The kind of silence that waits to be broken. Not peaceful, but expectant. Like I wasn't supposed to be there, or maybe like I wasn't alone. That night I took a lot more drastic measures. I set my phone on the entry table and aimed it straight at the front door. I propped it against a stack of coasters, set it to record video, and made sure the battery was at 100%. Then I opened the app and ordered an Uber. I had no intention of going anywhere. I just needed to make it look like I had. When the driver pulled up, I walked out, locked the door, and climbed in. I asked him to take me around the block and then drop me back on Pacific Avenue. He didn't ask me any questions, and I tipped him extra and then waited until he turned the corner before looping back to the house on foot. My heart was racing. I cut through an alley and crouched behind a neighbor's hedge until I had a clear view of the street. There was a car in the driveway that had not been there before. Dark blue SUV, nondescript, no plates on the front. I took a photo of it just in case. I approached the house slowly. The front door was cracked open. I stood outside for a few seconds just listening. Then, I pushed it open and stepped inside. The first thing I heard was movement, soft, unhurried footsteps in the back of the house, then a cupboard opening. I stayed low and moved fast, following the sounds to the kitchen. A man stood there, rummaging through the fridge, middle-aged, wearing a plain white hoodie and jeans. His hair was thinning, face puffy, like he hadn't slept in a while. When he turned and saw me, he froze like I just hit him with a spotlight. "Whoa, whoa," he said, hands half raised. "You scared me, man." "Who the fuck are you?" I asked, not yelling, just flatly. "I'm the owner," he said quickly. "It's my house." "No, it's not," I said. "Not right now. I have a reservation through Sunday." "Right," he said, nodding. "I know, I left some stuff here. I figured while you were out, I didn't mean to scare you." "Bullshit," I responded. "You've been here the whole time." He stepped toward the door casual. "Look, man, I didn't touch anything, all right? I was just grabbing a few things." "Don't move," I said to him. "My phone's been recording the door since I left. I saw your car. You've been coming and going." He hesitated, and I watched his face change. The mask slipped for a second. Not panic, but calculation. He realized that I wasn't buying his story. He also realized that I wasn't just going to let him leave. I pulled out my phone and hit the call button. "Calling the cops." "Hey, come on," he said, trying to sound calm. "That's not necessary. I'm not dangerous, I swear. This is my place, man. I just thought I could come by while nobody was home. I didn't think you'd be back so soon." "You went through my shit." He looked away. I'm missing $500 for my luggage and I know it was in there. His hands tightened at his side. And if I go check right now, I said, am I gonna find my laptop in your bag? I didn't get an answer, just that faint buzz of tension in the air, like we were two wires pressed together, waiting to spark. He then dropped his head and muttered, look, you don't need to call them, I'll give it back. I already called. He swore and spun around like he might bolt, but the front door was behind me now, and I'm not moving. A few minutes later, the cops showed up and I showed them the video of the phone, and the guy just stood there looking deflated. They went through his bag and found my laptop wrapped up in a sweatshirt, plus the small wad of cash. Some of the bills had my initials on the corner. I marked them on a whim when I packed. I travel a lot, and I have a lot of people try to steal from me before, so it's just something I do. The cops didn't cuff him, but they escorted him out and warned him not to return. They let me file a full statement. I watched his car disappear down the block, and it wasn't until it was completely out of sight that my hands finally started to shake. The cops told me he wasn't technically trespassing because he was the legal owner, and he hadn't used force to enter. It would take a formal complaint from Airbnb for charges to stick. But the officer nodded toward the recording on my phone and said, that'll definitely help. They're going to want to see that. I told them that I'd send it to whoever needed it. That night, because of everything, I didn't sleep much. I pushed the chair under the doorknob like some old cartoon, kept the lights on in every room, and stacked my suitcase in front of the front bedroom window, just in case I heard glass breaking. I waited for the sound of tires on gravel, the glint of that blue SUV pulling back into view, but it never came. I called the Airbnb first thing in the morning, walked them through everything that took place. To their credit, they didn't fight on anything. The woman I spoke to sounded young but serious enough. She asked for the video, the photos of the car, and the copy of the police report, which I emailed over that afternoon. By the end of that day, I had a full refund. They also added credit to my account and sent a follow-up message saying the host had been permanently suspended. Apparently, this wasn't the first time they'd gotten complaints about him. We were already reviewing his activity, she told me. I'm really sorry it took something like this to push it over the line. So am I. I stayed that last night of the trip in a boutique hotel closer to downtown. It wasn't fancy, cramped room, barely enough space to turn around in the shower, but the key card worked and nobody crept through my kitchen while I was gone, so that's good, right? I kept thinking about how easily I could have missed it though. If I stayed out a little longer that day or turned the camera a few degrees to the left, I might have come back to a wiped laptop, empty cash stash, and a gaslit conversation with some apologetic stranger claiming, "Oh wow, you must have just misplaced it." I don't know what would have happened if I caught him at the wrong moment either, if I hadn't kept my voice steady, if he decided that I was just another mark. I still use Airbnb. I'm not stupid. I know most of the hosts aren't like that. The company made it right and they didn't even dodge the damage. But now I photograph everything, I mark all my bills, and I never ever leave without locking every entry point and double checking it on my way out.
Growing up, I wasn't a small kid. No, I'm not going to be ashamed to say it. I was fat. Medically, I qualified as obese, and I suffered from some pretty severe depression following my parents' divorce. There was an emptiness in my life when my mom went off and left us, and I filled the void with food. I'm not that person anymore, but I'm not going to be ashamed that I was either. That's the kind of thing that leads down the path that I followed in the first place. And by the time I started high school, I welled way over 200 pounds and I was very big. I hated gym class and I dreaded the showers even more. It's not like everyone in my grade was some jock or anything like that, but I was by far the biggest boy in freshman year. The only upside to it is that I was a tough little guy as well. The bullies soon gave up on any kind of physical violence against me because I could take it. Shove me against the lockers, I'd just bounce back. Literally too, I guess. Slap my fat rolls, I had a very high pain threshold. Call me fat? Well, yeah, I knew I was. I could hardly deny it. I didn't love hearing it, but just pointing out that I was a big boy only stung internally. And so yeah, I was bullied and it did upset me, but I was great at not showing it, and I think a lot of the kids respected that. There was one kid, though. His name was Neil, and he was as skinny as I was fat. Now, I was pretty short for my age, but he was a whole head shorter than me, a really tiny guy. But he wasn't some adorable little shorty. Neil was a mean one, and no mistake. You could tell from the glint in his eye and the perpetual smirk on his face. And rumor had it that Neil could be such a bully that he once made a senior guy cry. Nobody really seemed to know exactly how Neil was a bully. Kids just knew to be wary of him and keep away from him, and this resulted in a couple of things. One, Neil had no friends. Nobody wanted to actually spend time with him because he was so unpredictable and supposedly volatile. Now sure, people would be polite to him and nod hello in the halls, but nobody wanted to sit with him at lunch or invite him to social events or anything like that. And two, it meant that some of the more physical bullies had it in mind to take Neil down, and that's where I came in. One day I was sitting alone eating lunch in the courtyard because, like Neil, I also didn't have any actual friends, and so who should come and sit beside me but Neil himself? He asked if I wanted half of his sandwich, and to be honest, it did look really delicious. I really didn't know what to do. Neil, this famous idiot, was offering me food. Was there some catch to it? Like it was filled with razor blades or something? In the end, I decided that I was more scared of what would happen if I said no, so I took the sandwich. And this seemed to make Neil happy, and even more so when I actually ate it. I didn't really know what to say after that, so I just sort of asked him if he was having a good day. Neil ignored my question and told me that he had a proposal for me. Neil basically proposed that I act as his bodyguard, and in exchange, he'd make sure that I wasn't the target of bullies. I told him I wasn't really bullied anymore these days, and he grinned, that sort of snide grin that he had, and pointed out that this was because he had left me alone so far. It was a good point. Neil had never bullied me, and I wasn't sure that I wanted to find out what would happen if he did. And so I agreed to be his friend and bodyguard, and this arrangement somehow lasted all the way to junior year. Neil used me to cause all kinds of trouble. He'd pick on certain kids, really vile stuff, and then have me threaten to fight them, or in most cases, take any blows that would have been aimed at him. Sometimes he'd force me to beat up younger kids, younger than myself, as we got older. In junior year in particular, we saw a few freshman targets that Neil took great delight in having me hurt. Now you may be wondering how Neil managed to have such a hold over me, especially since I wasn't that particularly thin-skinned. Well, Neil managed to find that chink in my armor, my mom. Anytime I tried to push back against Neil or deny him, then he'd throw a barb my way about how my mother had left because of her disgusting fat son and her autistic daughter and her fat R-slur husband. Neil also seemed to know pretty intimate details of the man my mother had run off with and what she was doing now. When I asked Dad about this, he got really quiet and just sort of asked me who I'd heard this from, which was all the answer I needed. Neil was able to use my mother against me quite often, and that hurt. It really hurt. And so I took the path of the coward. I chose to hurt other people instead of letting Neil hurt me. And I know this makes me a bad person. I regret all of it, but it is what it is now. And like I said, I'm going to call things as they are, although in this case, yes, I am ashamed of who I was. Neil's influence over me almost ruined my high school career as well. My report cards went steadily downhill. Dad never punished me. He just got kind of sad. One time, he was a little bit drunk, and he asked where he was going wrong with me and what he could do to help me to get back on track. And it just about broke my heart. And instead of facing up to that, I said something incredibly mean to him that I still apologize for to this day. I told him he could stop being such an embarrassing loser. Now meanwhile, I developed a reputation at school for being a bully and someone to avoid, so Neil was my only friend, really, for years. And somehow, Neil managed to twist things so it looked like I was the ringleader and he was my sidekick, so any trouble we got into, it was usually me who took the brunt of it. I remember one time, Neil persuaded me to scratch up the paint on the car belonging to one of the most popular seniors in school. If this guy had caught me, I think he was one of the few people in the school who would actually outdo me in a fight, and he would have pummeled me into the ground. Thankfully, we got away with that one. Towards the end of junior year, Neil developed a crush. The girl in question was an unassuming, bookish girl who was quiet and kept to herself. You know the type. Now, she was also the girl that I'd had a crush on for the last year as well, and I'm pretty sure that Neil knew this. Neil told me that he had a plan to ask her to date him. He just needed some time with her in the art classroom, and I had to stand guard to make sure nobody came along and unlocked the door. Now, I might have been a dumb kid, but I wasn't stupid. I knew that there was absolutely nothing good about what Neil might have planned, and so this one time, I said no. And Neil went nuts. Apparently, there were a lot of things that he'd been holding back, things that he knew about my mom, and according to him anyway, how my stepdad had been abusing my sister. And then he had all this evidence on his phone of my involvement and all the bullying, cut and edited in a way that looked like I was the sole culprit. In particular, there was minutes of footage of me vandalizing the senior's car. Neil threatened to reveal this to them and to reveal to the whole school the kind of loose woman my mother was and how she was allegedly pimping out her own daughter. And at that moment, I saw red. By this point, a lot of my fat had turned into muscle and I had a huge growth spurt. Neil was still tiny. I picked my bully up by the waist. I slammed him down on a table into the empty classroom we were conspiring in. And the crack I heard was almost as terrifying as Neil's screams. I knew I'd done something really, really terrible, something even Neil didn't deserve. And when it all came out, I didn't protect Neil, but I didn't try to protect myself either. I deserved a lot of the blame and I wanted to take it. After this, being sent to a military academy was my own choice. I'd scared myself stupid with my own rage, and I'd hurt people and I'd gotten out of control. Neil's family wanted to press charges, and the military academy also served as a compromise. And this is also how I found out that the man my mother had left the family for was Neil's father. This whole time, my new stepdad was Neil's biological dad who walked out on Neil's family when Neil was just a baby. And I can only guess that the whole thing was intended as some sort of roundabout revenge against me in the end. Military school was the making of me, really. And I took it like a duck to water. I graduated and then joined the military, where I'd stay there to this day. I hate the person I used to be, but I'm proud of the person I've become. And I heard that Neil took a very darker path and never tried to better himself. To a larger extent, I blame myself for this. I certainly see him as a victim in many circumstances. I try to make up for who I was every day. I serve our country, I donate to charity, I send money back to my dad to help my sister's care. Thankfully, Neil's claims of abuse towards my sister were lies aimed to disgrace his dad. Apparently, he's not even that bad of a guy. I don't want to know him, though. I just want to keep making amends for allowing one of the most effed up people I've ever known to dictate, dominate, and destroy my childhood. You may finish this story by hating me and thinking I'm a terrible person, and I wouldn't blame you, but I'm trying. I wish Neil had done the same, and from what I understand, he's done some pretty terrible things in the years since I've known him, and I can only hope that one day he takes his first steps onto the road to redemption that I'm attempting to walk myself. You can't take back the things you do, but you can try and make amends for them, even if it's too little and too late. When I was younger, in high school, I admit that I was a bit of a stoner, a sort of emo goth type who probably didn't take care of herself that well and smoked a little too much weed. Now, this was before weed was legal too, so we couldn't just walk to the store and pick some up. We'd spend our weekends hanging out in this sort of cubby hole under a bridge, not like the one from that famous dancing video you probably remember, and we'd turn it into a bit of a hangout space. Rugs, magazines, a battery-powered stereo, the works. Now, one rule was if you showed up, then you brought snacks. And there was one guy who didn't follow that rule, or any of them really, and his name was Birmingham. And that wasn't really his real name. I imagine that, but that's what he insisted we call him. Because get this, he'd been to Birmingham in England once on a vacation for like a month, and there were a bunch of ways Birmingham didn't fit in. He wasn't a goth or emo, he was more of a hippie. And he was this white dude with dreadlocks, although I'm not sure if they were dreads or whether his hair was really just that unkempt. Birmingham would never arrive with snacks either, and he'd never contribute free stuff to the den. He'd just stroll in and hang out while the rest of us put the work in. And while some of us might not have the best kind of hygiene, Birmingham had absolutely reeked of BO, and whoever got stuck sitting next to him, usually one of the girls, would have to develop a tolerance to his smell. Oh, and did I mention that Birmingham was 32? A 32-year-old stinking hippie hanging out with high school goths and emos, and he was not shy about hitting on some of the girls in the group. So, you're probably asking, why did we tolerate him? And the answer was simple. We were young, dumb, and he would buy us alcohol and provide us with weed. For a price, mind you, which he made no secret about skimming a profit from. He'd just shown up one day, told us that he could hook us up just as we'd been wondering how the hell to get into substance abuse. Spoiler, just don't. And he sort of just stuck around ever since. And so Birmingham, despite all of his flaws and age gap and being a creep, was very much always at our hangout. He acted like he was the king of the castle and we were his adoring servants, especially the women. Even though all of us resisted his quote-unquote charms, he behaved as if we constantly lusted after his stinky-ass body. He was gross, to put it mildly, and we were dumb enough to let him stick around anyways. And there were maybe 8 of us, including Birmingham, on and off, 4 girls, 3 high school guys, and this Birmingham guy. 2 of the guys were far too of losers to really ever stand up against him, and one of them was as much of a predator creep as Birmingham was. So between Birmingham and this other weirdo, whose name was Josh, us girls really had to watch ourselves. We just moved into junior year when Birmingham ramped up his behavior. He singled out a couple of the girls, they were named Sandy and Bridget, and started trying to get them to engage in some really strange actions with him. At first he offered free joints in exchange for this, and then it was an entire free baggie of weed, and then it was weed and unspecified pills. He must have been really desperate to get touched, as that's all he was aiming for, to start with anyway. And a rumor went around that Sandy did actually give in and even did some strange stuff with him for a bag of weed, and we didn't see her for about a week. And when she came back to the group, she seemed down and ashamed and wouldn't look anyone in the eye, and we got the impression that whatever experience she'd had with him had not been a good one. And knowing how pressurizing Birmingham could get, I could only imagine. Now, none of us wanted to bring it up with Sandy in case it wasn't that, but behind her back, most of the boys were not sympathetic, especially Josh, while obviously the girls felt bad for her. And we began talking about how to get rid of this Birmingham, but the boys were having none of it. He was our free ticket to weed and alcohol, and we weren't losing that just because Sandy wanted a freebie. These little assholes. I'm not going to pretend Sandy was innocent in this whole affair, but if you knew Birmingham, you'd know how far he'd tried to go to get what he wanted. And the fact that it had taken until now was a miracle. The thing that changed everything was when this new girl joined junior year and quickly became a member of our group. Her name was Summer, and ironically she had almost jet black hair, completely natural, and she soon became one of us, and Birmingham was smitten, and so was Josh. This was the first rift. Summer was one of those girls who was confident and she dressed provocatively, but she had no interest in doing anything with a dude, and so began a competition between Josh and Birmingham to be the first one to get Summer without clothes. They weren't trying to sleep with her, not yet anyway. They just made a bet to be the first one to consensually see her, and the consensual part wasn't out of respect or anything, it was just for bragging rights between these 2 weirdos. Naturally, Summer didn't appreciate this from the start, having 2 guys, one of whom was literally 32 and stank, trying to get her to do something like flashing, and she began asking some of us privately why we tolerated this weirdo, and so we explained. And then she asked why we tolerated Josh, and we started realizing that there really wasn't actually a good reason for that. He was a creepy idiot too, but he normally targeted girls outside the group. There were all sorts of rumors circulating about the way he'd treated past girlfriends. Summer decided she'd try to handle it, and her solution was to offer some kind of vague incentive to Josh or Birmingham to whichever one beat the other in a fight. And very clearly beat, no question that they'd won, i.e., she meant one of them to put the other in the hospital. Summer had expected them to say no, that it wasn't worth it, but apparently this high school boy and this 32-year-old man were willing to risk killing each other over seeing some girl's body, and so it was decided that the fight would be that Friday night. Summer had become my personal best friend, really, so she was panicking to me on the telephone about this. And of course she didn't want anyone to get hurt, she just wanted both of them to just screw off. We couldn't think of any solutions other than to try and de-escalate the fight or call the cops if we really had to. And ultimately, none of that needed to happen. We all showed up to the hangout on Friday. Birmingham made some disgusting crude comment about how he was going to win the fight and Summer would be compelled to do all sorts of unspeakable things. And that's when he attacked. Only the attack didn't come from Josh. Now remember I said the other two guys who were too much of babies to ever stand up against Birmingham? Well, it turns out that wasn't true. One of them, a guy named Craig, suddenly went flying across the room, slamming Birmingham against the concrete wall of the hangout and pinning him there by the throat. Craig was a big guy, tall and large, and he had no problem holding this skinny, wiry Birmingham guy in place. And it all came out. How much we all hated Birmingham, and how he was a stinking, vile parasite who could only get with women by trying to bribe children with drugs. How none of us could stand him, basically everything we'd ever wanted to say to him. You see, we found out later that Craig had been developing a burning, powerful crush on Summer, and the more Birmingham and Josh talked about her like that, the more quietly and fuming he got. And then he just snapped. We watched in silent awe as Craig headbutted Birmingham square in his nose, audibly breaking it, and we listened as he threatened to gut him violently if he ever showed his face around the hangout again, or even around town. And then he pulled the hunting knife out of his belt. That's the exact moment Josh walked in, looking sick and nervous, presumably for his fight. You'd expect this to distract Craig, but it didn't. He held the knife up to Birmingham's throat so tightly that it drew beads of blood and told him how serious he truly was. And then Craig dropped some info we didn't know. He mentioned the name of his family, a well-known Irish-American gang in town who were, to say the least, serious business. And when Birmingham heard that, that's what finally broke him. He began to cry, begging forgiveness and apologizing to Craig. And Craig said it wasn't him who deserved the apology, it was Summer. And Summer just shook her head and said she didn't care, she just wanted this guy out of there. So Craig let him limp away, and that was the last we ever saw of that creepy drug dealer again. Now meanwhile, Josh had been watching the whole thing with a sort of sick look on his face, as I said, and Craig turned to him, tucked the knife back into his belt, and just gave him this look that sort of said, "You could be next." And the group kind of dissipated after that. Nobody really had the energy to hang out with each other with all that violence hanging in the air, and Summer and I stayed friends, and the other girls and guys sort of drifted away. We're still friends to this day, and sometimes Summer and I talk about how we were regularly hanging out with 3 different guys who were scary in their own way. And there was Josh, who I later found out got kicked out of college for his conduct with a female student, and then there was Birmingham, who, looking back, was more terrifying than I truly realized, an adult male trying to use intoxicants to get underage women into bed with him. And while he was maybe the least dangerous, Craig was definitely the scariest. Nothing suggested he'd explode that day, and nothing gave away that he was the black sheep of an extremely violent family. And all we can be grateful for is that Craig's first outburst of rage was directed at the right target. When I was growing up during high school, we had a quiet kid in class. You know the type that I'm talking about. This was post-Columbine, so quiet kid jokes were told, but kind of in a whispered tone. Nobody wanted to actually trigger the quiet kid or generally cause anything really bad to happen, and Kenny never actually showed serious signs of violence. Well, mostly anyway. Occasionally some of the cool kids would give him crap and he'd lash out and sort of yell at them, and whenever he got angry, his voice became incomprehensible, which really didn't help with people calling him an R-word or slow or a prospective danger to society. Now, a few things about Kenny that were actually true. His mom cut his hair in a bowl cut, and the 2000s you'd think that she'd absolutely have to know that this was going to bring the wrath of 1,000 high schoolers down on him. And he also carried a Spider-Man backpack at all times, one from the animated series, and it was before people thought things like this were retro and cool, and so that was another reason people dunked on poor Kenny. He could barely communicate if you spoke to him. He'd spend so long thinking about what you said that it felt like he was almost ignoring you, and you had to learn to just stand there and wait, and eventually Kenny would reply. Most times anyway. Sometimes he really would just zone out, and you'd have to sort of yell his name to snap him back to attention. Now looking back, Kenny shouldn't really have been in school with regular kids, or if he was, he should have had some kind of helper or something. And instead, this probably autistic, probably mentally ill kid was just left to fend for himself in the Thunderdome that is high school. I was so relieved when the new kid, Bradley, joined the school, and he was one of those tall, blonde, wholesome American boys who got along well with pretty much everybody. He excelled at sports, he was smart, the works, and I might have been a little jealous, I gotta admit. And so Bradley became friends with basically everyone in no time, but of all the people he hung around the most, it was Kenny. And I guess you could say that he took him under his wing, but it didn't feel patronizing or protective or anything like that. He really brought Kenny out of his shell. It turns out that when he wasn't ostracized and constantly made fun of, Kenny was actually pretty funny, pretty smart guy. He was deeply intelligent and he was an absolute whiz at chess, and so was Bradley. And Bradley slowly integrated Kenny into various friendship groups. And for his part, Kenny, shockingly, integrated right back. And it was like this strange, unique, beautiful kid had been waiting beneath the surface for someone like Bradley to evolve him. And it was absolutely, utterly tragic that it just couldn't last. Now one day, I came in a little too late to school because I didn't have class first period, and as soon as I got there, I could tell some commotion was going on. Cops were there, and it looked like they were searching lockers, Kenny's locker in particular. I watched as they bagged something up and removed it from the premises, and shortly after that, a sniffling, crying Kenny was marched down the corridor in handcuffs. Now here's the story we were told. Bradley, as his best friend, had discovered that Kenny was planning to dose the food in the school cafeteria with some type of poison. This plan had been underway since well before Bradley joined the school, but instead of making the most of his newfound popularity, Kenny decided to go ahead with it anyway. Bradley had seen the poison in Kenny's locker and, despite his friendship with Kenny, couldn't let this slide and reported it to the school. One kid's dad was high up in the force and kind of snuck a look at the notes on the investigation, and it looked like they didn't have much on Kenny. He was claiming he didn't even know what that substance was. And then Bradley found the manifesto. It had been hidden behind a false wall in Kenny's locker that he had, and Bradley had somehow dug it out, and it detailed Kenny's plan to poison the food and how on the same day he was going to bring 3 pistols to school belonging to his dad and finish anyone off that way. Bradley brought this manifesto straight to the dean, and I guess he really hadn't thought this through. 1, why was Bradley able to access Kenny's locker, find that wall, and discover this manifesto when the cops didn't? 2, Kenny's dad had died many years ago, and while that didn't rule out the idea of him owning guns, he had been a staunch anti-gun campaigner, so the idea of Kenny accessing his father's guns seemed ridiculous. 3, the manifesto was supposedly written before Bradley even came to the school, but the food that Kenny claimed he was going to poison had not been on the menu until that year. Naturally, this made the school authorities and the cops suspicious. Kenny had been suspended from school at the time since there was no actual proof he planned on committing a crime, and then the next thing we knew, Bradley was no longer in attendance either. It turns out Brad was a psychopath who had been kicked out of his last school for antisocial behavior. His father owned an exterminator firm that specialized in killing rats. One of the few remaining uses of that poison is in rat poison. Kenny would not have been able to get his hands on that type of stuff easily. Bradley would have. And eventually, with warrants served, the cops were able to prove that bottles of this stuff were missing from Bradley's dad's inventory. And not only that, they were able to get access to the family computer, and what they found was very damning. A saved file containing the whole manifesto. According to the kid, whose dad was one of the lead detectives, Bradley broke down and sang like a canary. Not a remorseful one, but a proud one. When he arrived at the school and first saw Kenny and heard the quiet kid jokes, he was curious. He wanted to know what kind of punishment would be dealt out to someone who might be a school-based criminal, and he was curious about the effect it'd have on Kenny. Rumor has it that when asked, Bradley coldly admitted that he was curious if Kenny would commit some kind of act against himself. You know what I mean? I don't know exactly what happened to Bradley. He was expelled, but I'm not sure what kind of criminal charges were brought against him. His father doubled down on the misplaced poison having nothing to do with his son, and so we never saw Bradley again. And we never saw Kenny either. The whole incident broke him, and I wish I could say that he'd overcome his experiences, returned to school, and been embraced by us again. I know we would have welcomed him back, but Bradley broke him. Kenny spent the rest of his high school career in some kind of mental institute, and for all I know, he's still there. I've tried to find him a few times, but I've never been successful. And on the chance that you're living your best life, Kenny, and also somehow hear this, I wish you the best. Bradley, you seem to be a psychopath, and I hope you ended up locked away for the safety of everyone. Spending my teenage years around someone like you was the most chilling and horrific thing possible, and the way you tortured poor Kenny is unforgivable. Adults can be awful, but kids can be truly, truly evil.
My name is Josh, and I'm currently 20 as I'm writing this. This happened almost 4 months ago when I moved out of state to start my first semester of college. My financial aid would not cover housing, so I found myself scrambling to find off-campus housing. Fortunately, with the help of my parents, I was able to rent out a house for 2 semesters. It was this small one-storied home that was just a hop, skip, and a jump from campus. It wasn't the nicest house, but it was what I could afford at the time. The majority of people in the surrounding homes were a lot older than me, though that was expected when living off campus. However, there was this one guy who lived a couple houses down that gave off a really weird vibe. If I had to guess, I'd say he had to be in his late 50s or early 60s. He would go on long walks with his dog really early in the morning and knock on my door to say good morning. At first, it wasn't that strange, but he began doing this every day, which made me a bit irritated. On top of this, he would always try to strike up these long, unnecessary conversations that I wasn't interested in. If I ever made up an excuse as to why I couldn't talk to him, he'd disregard my words and do it anyway. It even came to a point where I told him I was late for class, and he had walked with me to campus. The only time he'd ever leave is if I went into class or in one of the buildings. No matter how many times I tried getting him to go away, he still persisted. I'd give him a dry response, he'd only talk more. I'd walk faster, he'd walk faster. This went on for a good 2 weeks before I finally told him in the most polite way to leave me alone in the mornings as I had school. He seemed to have understood, but also gave me this look of pure disappointment. I felt bad, but I legitimately couldn't have him doing what he's been doing anymore. I remember one of the other neighbors telling me he apparently suffered from some personality disorder, but that he didn't have a history of violence or anything. I asked why he seemed to only be acting like this towards me, and he told me that it wasn't his place to decide who lived there, as that decision was up to the property manager. Weeks went by, and I hadn't seen him at my door, nor did I see him come out of his house with his dog. I thought of this as suspicious, but dismissed it as him respecting my wishes by leaving me alone. Those weeks were normal, with me focusing on my studies, being social with friends, etc. Life went on as usual after that, until one night where something happened I didn't expect. I was in my room studying for one of my midterms when I hear something small hit my window. The curtains were covered, so I wasn't able to see what it was. About 10 seconds later, I hear it again and then came to the conclusion that it was a small rock hitting my window. This time, I got up and opened my curtains to see the man standing still as a statue outside. As if that wasn't strange enough by itself, he wasn't even on the sidewalk, but rather on the driveway of the house. By this point, it was decently late and decided to call it a night. I simply ignored him by closing my curtains, even though I was terrified inside. I shut off all the lights, making sure to lock every door and window in the house to ensure he didn't come in. The next morning, I carefully unlocked the front door to check if he was still out there. When the coast was clear, I booked it toward campus, where I was constantly looking back to make sure I wasn't being followed. I went to my classes, hung out with some of my friends, and by the time evening hit, I walked back home and was met with a sight I wasn't expecting. There were about 3, maybe 4 police cars, along with an ambulance parked outside my house, their lights flashing over the sound of radio chatter. I saw paramedics putting a man I had never seen before on a stretcher and into the ambulance. I then saw police handcuffing my creepy neighbor and putting him into a police cruiser. When I basically demanded to know what was going on, they told me that the person harmed was actually the meter reader. I completely forgot about this, as I've only ever met the meter reader once, and that was when I moved in. By law, a meter reader can typically enter a home whether you're there to let them in or not. He had keys to my house and entered through the back door to check the meters in the basement. Waiting for him in the basement was my neighbor, who jumped him with one of my kitchen knives and jammed it into his shoulder. The reason he was in my house was to probably wait for me until I got home. He must have mistaken the meter reader for me, and that's when he attacked. To my surprise, someone in the area had spotted the man entering the house through a window before the reader got there and called the police. A couple days later, I was moved to a different location off campus and was actually reimbursed for what my family paid. I'm graduating in a couple years, and while I'm definitely going to miss college, I sure hope I don't ever encounter something like that again. About 2 years ago, I bought a house for the first time ever at only 28 years old. It was my first ever real investment, you can say, and I couldn't be prouder of myself. I worked in the entertainment industry for big celebrities / social media influencers and stuff like that, so I made decent money. Most of my neighbors were nice. Some had kids, some didn't, and sort of just kept to themselves. It was just me and my dog Milo. Milo was a pure white Dogo Argentino with the height of a small horse and a bite so powerful it could tear a limb off. All I have to say is, good luck breaking into my house with him around. My first week of moving in, I met one of my neighbors who gave me the all too familiar greeting followed by a batch of sugar cookies. The usual welcoming you'd commonly see when someone moves into a new neighborhood. She introduced herself as Brenda and told me she had lived just up the street and that it was nice to meet me. She was the sweet little old lady who had the heart of gold and was a joy to anyone. Brenda had went on to explain that her cookies were homemade and that it was her very own recipe. Surprisingly enough, I was actually allergic to wheat flour, but I wasn't going to be rude and decline them. I just put them on the kitchen counter, wondering if I should throw them away or give them to someone in need. By this point, I had successfully moved everything in and decided to call some of my childhood friends over to come and celebrate with some beer. It was already 9 and I had to get to bed early for work the next morning, so I knew my friends couldn't stay long. When they arrived, we had seen a football game on TV, had some dinner, and just enjoyed ourselves. At one point, we're all talking amongst ourselves, having a blast with beers in our hands, when I see Milo staring at me in this weird position. I playfully asked him what was up, and he responded with faint whimpers as he laid back down. It was then when I immediately knew something was wrong. I had Milo for almost 5 years now, and not once did I ever see him behave like this. Now, I'm obviously no expert or anything, but it was almost as if his attitude kept changing every few minutes. One minute he'd be happy, the next he'd be sad, and the next minute just flat out angry. His demeanor completely altered. One of my friends had a girlfriend who was a vet, and he was able to FaceTime her where I was able to tell her what was going on. She immediately started asking if I fed him something he shouldn't have eaten or if he were on medication. I was about to say no when I remembered about the cookies I had left on the table. Sure enough, I found a chewed up plastic plate along with half a dozen of those cookies devoured scattered across the hallway. Milo must have helped himself to my special treat when I wasn't looking, and I guess I didn't notice until now. 2 of my friends had to leave while the other one had decided to help me rush Milo to the vet. Turns out, he was just on the verge of death when we got there, as the vet explained he was displaying unusual symptoms. They ran a few tests on him, and what they found shocked them to their core. High traces of brodifacoum were found in Milo's system. It's a seriously dangerous poison used for killing larger rodents like possums and other pests. When ingested or consumed by humans, it causes your body to shut down your organs to the point where your body doesn't even know how to fight it off. It starts off mild, but gradually develops over a few hours. We later found out that it had been embedded inside of the cookies. Law enforcement had taken down my information about the woman who gave me those cookies, and after a whole search of the neighborhood, she was never found. To be completely honest with you, I wasn't even sure if she even lived in the neighborhood. Why she targeted me and why she laced the cookies with rodent poison is still unclear. Milo thankfully ended up living and is still the happiest companion I know. My wife and I got married and just had our first kid who absolutely adores Milo. I'll protect them all with my life.
I lived in that apartment for just under a year. It was a ground floor, one bedroom on the east side of the complex, a really old building with cheap carpet, that kind of place where your neighbors are close enough to hear you sneeze through that drywall. Still, I guess it was peaceful enough. Most of the tenants were middle-aged or older, quiet folks with too much debt and not enough ambition. You'd hear the occasional shouting match through the vents or catch a late-night party teetering towards chaos, but it was rare. The cops would come maybe twice that whole first 6 months, and neither time did it seem like anything major. For me, I just kept to myself, worked really long hours, came home, ate dinner, watched some TV, and then went to bed. I didn't need noise. I'd had my time in louder and messier places. At this point in my life, this apartment was supposed to be my safe haven, my first real grown-up place, and for a while that's exactly what it was. And things didn't start to get weird until Flynn moved in. He showed up on a Wednesday morning, and I remember it because his moving van was blocking my car in. I had to bang on the cab just to get out to work. He didn't apologize, just gave me this blank stare like he hadn't heard a word that I just said to him. Thin guy, probably in his 40s, but somehow ageless in this way that made it hard to pin him down. Black hoodie, gloves in June, old army boots with the laces triple knotted. Not the kind of look you expect from somebody moving into a low-income housing. I couldn't tell if he was crazy or just eccentric. I introduced myself, got his first name, and that was as much as he was willing to share, at least in the moment. He moved in fast, and within 2 hours the van was gone and Flynn was holed up behind his door and just disappeared. That first week was really quiet, but something about the air near his place started to feel charged, like standing far too close to a buzzing transformer. At night, I'd hear the faint click of metal or the low scratch of something being dragged across concrete out on his patio. Nothing dramatic or nothing you'd call the cops over, but I just noticed it, and it was always after midnight. By week 2, I knew the guy was a complete weirdo. The first time I saw the fire, I thought maybe he was just grilling. I stepped out onto my patio and smelled the burning paper almost immediately. Not charcoal, not meat, just scorched papers and something that smelled like melted plastic. I peered around the divider and there he was. Flynn crouched over this big metal coffee can, feeding papers into the flame like he was praying to it. The way he stared into it, it wasn't normal. It wasn't boredom, but almost devotion. I grew up Baptist. I've seen that same kind of look on people's faces during prayer and sermon. This guy moved in next door to me and he was out of his damn mind. I stood there watching until he glanced my way, not moving, just locking eyes. He didn't say a word, just reached out slowly and placed a lid over the fire, snuffing it out instantly. Then he went back inside. I didn't really sleep that much that night. Just the whole thing kind of put me off. A few nights after that fire, I noticed a new wrinkle in the routine. Flynn had started dragging something across his floor around 2 a.m. This slow and heavy scraping sound, like furniture being moved an inch at a time. I knew it wasn't just my imagination because the baseboard heater on our shared wall would buzz whenever he did it. It only lasted a few minutes, but it was always that same exact sound, like a piece of metal being hauled across tile. I started jotting it all down in a notebook, not because I thought anything criminal was going on, but because I had a feeling that it might get there. Next came the SUV. It was one of those matte black Suburbans you only see in movies or government stings. No plates, tinted windows dark enough to double as mirrors. The first time it showed up, I thought maybe Flynn was dealing drugs or maybe some high-level courier gig or something worse, I don't know. But the men who stepped out didn't look like drug runners, no gold chains or neck tattoos. These guys wore crisp, matching suits, moved like military. Clean shaven, stoic faces, no wasted movement. They went straight to Flynn's door and knocked once, then walked in without even waiting. The door just opened. I didn't hear any yelling, no loud conversations, not even laughter. Just the creak of the furniture and some soft footsteps. I think they stayed maybe 2 hours, then left in that same coordinated fashion, almost like a drill team. The visit happened 3 times in the span of 2 weeks. I attempted to ask Flynn about it. We crossed paths near the mailboxes one morning and I gave him this friendly nod. Asked if he was settling in okay. He didn't look up, just muttered something that sounded almost like fine, and kept walking. I followed him a few steps, not aggressively, just to keep the conversation going. I asked him if that black SUV was family or maybe a security firm or something. That's when he stopped, turned, and looked right through me. You know, I'd just mind your own business if I were you, he said. His voice was flat, but there was weight behind it, like a warning that he'd given before. Not angry, not defensive, just a matter-of-fact threat. The kind of man makes when he's not bluffing. I backed up because what more could I do? This guy was clearly mental and also had some kind of security hookup that I did not want to mess with. Still, I couldn't help myself. I bought a cheap dash cam and parked facing the walkway, angled it just enough to catch whoever came or went. I started recording all the late night visits, but after the 3rd black SUV sighting, nothing had happened for weeks. No more fires, no more visitors. Flynn didn't leave his apartment during the day, at least from what I could tell. I started to wonder if he'd even moved out or maybe he was dead up there. Then a couple showed up. It was a Friday night. I had just sat down to eat when I heard the purr of a low-slung engine outside. Not a junker or a pickup, this was luxury. I peeked through the blinds and saw a silver McLaren pulled into the visitor spot. 2 people got out, a man and a woman, both in these tailored coats and dressed like they were heading to the red carpet. The woman wore heels so sharp they clicked like gunshots. The man had this navy blazer, clean jawline, hair trimmed to the millimeter. They walked straight to Flynn's unit. He opened up the door before they knocked, and I promise you, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The following wasn't quiet like the other visits. I couldn't make out every word, but the tone was clipped and strained, urgent, bordering on angry. There was pacing, raised voices, Flynn's deeper tone trying to stay calm while the younger guy seemed to push back harder. The woman said very little, but when she did speak, it cut through like a knife. Then abruptly it all stopped. All 3 of them walked out calmly, almost robotically, and Flynn escorted them to their car. He even smiled as they drove off. And that was that. Over those next few days, the silence felt deliberate. Not a creak, not a scrape. Flynn's blinds were always shut tight. The lights were never on, so no smells even coming from his vent. This deep quiet had now settled in. Not long after all of this, a smell did come. It hit me the following Thursday. Just a sour tinge at first, like spoiled milk or wet garbage left out for far too long, but by Friday it was unbearable. I thought maybe something died in the crawl space, so I reported it to the management. They said somebody would come check it out, but nobody did. Saturday morning I left for work with the windows open, my shirt collar pulled over my face. When I got back that evening, the parking lot was filled with patrol cars. 2 cruisers, an unmarked black unit, and an ambulance. Yellow tape across Flynn's door. A crime scene tech squatting by the patio with a clipboard. One of the black-suited men that I'd seen before was now standing off to the side, arms crossed, watching the cops work. He wasn't saying anything. I stood at the far edge of the lot until one of the officers noticed me. He walked over, a really tall guy, maybe his mid-40s, looked really tired, and I asked what was going on. We found somebody deceased in the unit, he said. You one of the neighbors? Yeah, he lived next door to me. I've been smelling something awful all week. Well, that was probably him, the officer said flatly. He's been dead at least that long, and we're still trying to confirm ID. That gave me an opening. I started telling him everything, the fires, the SUV visits, the couple in the sports car, the midnight dragging sound. The officer scribbled down some notes, nodding now and again, but never really looked surprised. "We're not treating this as a homicide, at least at this time," he said finally. "There was no signs of forced entry, no external injuries. Coroner thinks it was natural." I must have looked skeptical because he gave me this half shrug. "These things happen," he said. "Weird guy, weird life. Doesn't always mean some kind of foul play." I watched as they zipped up the body bag and loaded it into the ambulance. That night, I sat in my living room with the lights off, staring at that thin wall between my unit and Flynn's. I thought about everything that I'd seen, everything that I'd heard, and just kept coming back to one detail that I hadn't shared. That last time I saw him, after the couple left, I caught a glimpse of something strange through a sliding door. Just a flash or a reflection maybe. But it looked like a metal table bolted to the floor with heavy leather straps hanging off the sides. It wasn't there before. What apartment would come with something like that? They cleared out Flynn's unit by the following Monday. No hazmat suits, no media coverage, just quiet men with gloves and cardboard boxes. Management didn't send out a notice or even acknowledge the death. I only knew he was officially gone when a cleaning crew came by and gutted the place. Ripped up the carpet, pulled the blinds, emptied the fridge. I watched from behind my own curtains that entire time. Nobody took that metal table though, or at least I never saw it come out. It stayed there, square in the center of the room, covered with a tarp. When the crew left for lunch, I slipped out and peeked through the patio door. The straps that I'd seen weren't leather, they were thick canvas, army surplus style, stained with something dark around the buckles. There was a groove in the floor beneath it, almost like scoring from repeated dragging, the kind that you don't get from just one piece of furniture. Flynn had indeed died in that apartment, that much I knew, but nothing about it felt natural at all to me. I'd say a week later, I saw the black SUV again. No police on site this time, no lights, no noise. It pulled up around 5 in the morning and stayed parked for nearly an hour. Nobody went in, nobody came out. Then it just drove off, slow and casual, like it had all the time in the world. I tried looking up Flynn on the internet, but I had no last name to go on. I checked the public records, scanned some arrest reports, even pulled some county death records. Nothing. It was like this guy never existed. The unit stayed empty for months, then eventually a young couple ended up moving in. They hung these fairy lights on the patio, brought a baby home from the hospital, watered plants. Nice people, friendly. But occasionally on warm nights, when they leave the patio door cracked open, I could swear that I hear the same dragging sound through the wall. And I ask myself, what that unsuspecting family might be living on top of.
I don't work nights anymore, but for years I worked the night shift in a residential care facility. On weekends, I was the only person in charge of a dementia facility. It was sometimes spooky, consisting of 15 residents and only me to keep an eye on them all throughout the night. Around 3 a.m. in the morning, after doing an intentional round where I checked on all the residents and they were safe and well, I heard the doorbell ring. I got a sudden wave of goosebumps because this was a secure facility and it was the middle of the night. I went and looked out of the window, but there was nobody there. I blew it off as being a hallucination because I was exhausted most of the nights. About 10 minutes later, the doorbell rang again, so I went back to the window and checked again. Nobody was there, but I looked across the street and a strange car was parked there. I took a photo of it just in case, and then I went back to my station where I had been playing a game of cards with a delightful but very demented lady. I sat down and she looked at me and said, "What did the gentleman want, dearie?" Chills went down my spine, but I brushed it off because hallucinations are common with dementia, and this lady is particularly prone to not being oriented to time and place. However, the doorbell rang again less than 5 minutes later, and this time I was getting scared. Another one of my residents was awake and walking in the hallway, painting with a clean paintbrush to keep him occupied. I passed him on the way to the front window, and he turned to me and said, "Don't answer the door alone, he might hurt you," before continuing to pretend to paint. I looked out of the window to see the same car as before, and as I was looking around, I saw a shadow moving in front of the door. A person walked around the corner and then looked straight into the window next to me. We made direct eye contact, and it was essentially a jump scare for me, so I was startled and screamed. My residents started freaking out, and the guy on the other side of the door ran away. I called the police, and they showed up shortly after. It was straight chaos at that point, because I had 15 residents who all had been woken by the commotion, and 2 police officers in the building now also. Eventually, with the help of the 2 kind officers, I was able to get everybody settled down, but it took a while. I eventually learned from the cops that there was a woman down the road whose house was broken into. She was attacked in bed by someone who ransacked her house looking for drugs. I can't help but wonder if it was the same person from earlier that night intentionally trying to get into my facility for the drugs that are kept there. I'm grateful that our whole facility was so secure, and apparently the culprit just took the next best option. A strange part of the story that I'll never understand is how 2 of my patients knew that there was a man out there who wanted to enter and potentially hurt me. They were never close enough to the door to look out of the window and see anyone. It feels like one of those eerie guardian angel moments, or just a strange coincidence. I left that job not long after because they refused to hire a second person to work the nights, despite being understaffed according to best practice guidelines. I worked at a water treatment plant on the graveyard shift. The place was isolated, situated next to a highway that connected 2 cities about an hour apart. Nothing but some empty fields and trees were in between. It would just be me there during the night shift. My job, and why I had to be there, was to check the levels, adjust equipment every now and then, and basically just make sure that everything was working and it wasn't going to blow up. During my shift, I would be inside an 8-foot-tall barbed wire fence which was locked, but the access door to the rest of the facility were always open. One night at about 2:30 or 3 a.m., I was sitting in my control room area killing time on my Nintendo DS. The sound of the game was the only thing breaking the silence, and I was halfway zoning out when I heard a voice from behind me. The voice shouted out to get on the ground. I turned around and saw a guy standing there behind me holding a gun. He must have climbed the barbed wire fence to get to me, because I could see he was bleeding from several locations on his body. I must have been taking a while to comprehend what was happening, because the man yelled to get on the ground again. I didn't hesitate this time, and I dropped to my knees. He kept the gun pointed at me as he stepped closer. I remember that he kept apologizing to me, saying that he was sorry, but he had to do this. I thought that maybe he had been hired to kill me by someone, and what could I have possibly done to deserve this? He began asking for my truck keys, my wallet, and my phone. I didn't argue, and I handed everything over. Next, he tied me up. He used some duct tape that was near my desk, wrapping it around my wrists and my ankles. I still had no idea if I was going to die soon, or maybe I was being kidnapped and that's why he was tying me up. After a few minutes, the guy backed away. He apologized again, and then he turned and walked out of the room. I heard the sound of my truck starting up, and then the tires crunching the gravel as he drove away. For a moment, I just sat there, totally in shock, trying to calm myself down. The duct tape wrapped around my wrists and ankles wasn't the greatest, and I was able to free myself after a while. I used the emergency phone at the water treatment facility and called the police, and they said they would send someone right away. When the cops came, they asked me a bunch of questions, wrote down everything I could remember, and arranged for a way home for me. The next day, I found out the guy was arrested in the town over. He'd apparently escaped from an inmate custody transport a few days before, and had been on the run ever since. The police said he was desperate, probably running out of options, and that he had likely walked a long way to get to the water plant. That made sense, considering how far in the middle of nowhere the plant was. I even got all my stuff back besides the cash in my wallet, because he had been caught trying to pawn off my stuff in the next town over. I think about that night often, and have had to go to some therapy for it. The man was obviously desperate, and maybe he had thought about killing me, since it would likely have given him more time to escape, as the cops would have been called much later. There have been some other strange occurrences that happened while I was working the night shift job, but this one was easily the scariest thing that I ever experienced there. Many years ago, I used to work a night shift at a hotel in South Carolina. During the summer season, it wasn't so bad, mostly families. We had on-site security during the summer also. However, the winter months were different. The cheap weekly rates we'd offer attracted a lot of creepy people. The idea was to make money in the off-season by renting to what is known as snowbirds, older retired people who come to the beach for a month or so through the winter. It did not always work out that way though. The cheap rates made it possible for less than desirable people to become long-term residents. I've discovered more than my fair share of meth labs, broken up physical assaults, and more during the winter months. Working the night shift, I would meet some interesting people. I have a lot of stories from the night shift, but this one is the one that stands out because it did not end well for me. I began working at midnight and hung out with my friend Andrew. Andrew worked late-night maintenance shifts at this hotel and 2 other hotels that our company owned. He would regularly stop by after work and go grab us some food, and we'd hang out and talk since business was so slow. We had just ordered food, and he was getting ready to leave and go pick it up. I was just walking into the office to grab some money from my wallet to give it to Andrew when I heard the doorbell indicating a customer had entered. I had just come back and reached the doorway back to the lobby area when I saw Andrew just fall down in front of me. Next thing I knew, a guy walked around the corner and punched me in the head with a short steel pipe in his hand. It staggered me and I went on one knee. He hit me in the head with the pipe, and the only thing I remember was his partner saying that Andrew got away and found a cop, so they had to go now. I was finally able to get to my feet from the blow I received. I tried to call the police from the phone in the back office, but it was having issues. I slammed it in frustration. I was hurt, scared, and really freaking out. I realized they could come back, so I ran to lock the door. I don't know where Andrew had gone, and that worried me. I finally got the phone to work, and I told the 911 operator that I had been attacked, and I needed an officer and an ambulance. I didn't unlock the front door until the cops and ambulance pulled up. It was at this time, after I found out they punched and knocked him down, that Andrew had been able to amazingly jump over the desk and escape. He luckily ran outside as a cop was driving by, which he ran to flag down for help. I ended up in the hospital ER where I had to have 10 staples in my head, and they gave me morphine for pain. I thought I had only been hit in the head once after being punched, but I was later shown the video from the hotel cameras, and the video showed a different story. After I went to one knee, the guy hit me not just one time, but 10 total times. I kept trying to grab the pipe and get up for some reason. I do not remember any of this happening. He kept punching me and hitting me with the pipe until his accomplice told me that Andrew got away and flagged down a cop. We never found out why they chose to attack me. The police thought it might be a failed robbery attempt due to Andrew getting away and me not just going down. The only other explanation I could think of was someone was getting revenge on me for one of the many incidents I had to deal with while working the night shift. For example, maybe someone was getting back at me for a physical assault that I broke up in a room, or the meth labs I had discovered. Once I recovered, I came back to work the night shift for a bit, but I had PTSD and was very nervous it might happen again, so I ended up finding a different job. They never caught the guys who did it as far as I know. I used to work night shifts at this large manufacturing facility. The night shift consisted of a very small crew, including 5 security workers and 5 of us doing administration and packing. As administration staff, I sat with security as they'd switch between patrolling and monitoring the cameras. It was usually silent and boring. One night near Halloween, I was halfway into my shift on my lunch hour break. It was chilly, and I went to my car to grab my bigger jacket and have a smoke break. I was right outside the back door where this fence is closest to the building. It's maybe 10 yards off the back door. The only light was motion activated, and I had to keep making grand arm movements to keep it on. It's all grass and shadows up to the fence, and the light doesn't really hit that far. I was watching videos on my phone, and the light went out from a lack of motion. I sat in the dark a bit, sipping my coffee and finishing my cigarette. As I was finishing, I reached up and waved to activate the light to find the ashtray, but as the light flickered on, I heard a noise on the fence across from me. We do get some animals out there, and they could get startled, but as I stood up, I heard the fence keep slightly jiggling. When I looked up, I didn't see much. The light didn't really illuminate much outside its circle on the ground. My first thought was to say hello, which I did in a questioning tone. When I spoke, the sound stopped for a moment. I squinted into the darkness trying to adjust, but it was hard with the light on. However, once the light turned off again, the light from the moon had a little bit more effect lighting up the area. The fence started jiggling again. As my eyes adjusted better, I saw movement. It looked like a person opposite me at the fence fidgeting with the links. I thought this must be a kid just trying to spook us. Maybe they were going to break in and explore, which some kids had done before without knowing the building never closed. But it wasn't common, and this was one person, alone. I was worried, so I radioed to desk security with my walkie-talkie. I informed security that we had a visitor outside the fence on the north end of the building. I've seen the monitors of camera feed, and I know this area is totally covered by cameras. They would be able to check the fence clearly. My walkie beeped back, and the security guy said, "We aren't reading any movement at the fence. Is it in the tree line?" I responded back no, and they were fiddling with the fence right in front of me. The next events all happened so fast. Security didn't even have the chance to reply to me when from the fence, I heard this massively louder thrash of the lynx, and all I saw was a figure full-on sprinting at me. I spilled my coffee all over as I rushed back inside the building. I pushed myself inside and held the knob in place, trying to keep the deadbolt in place. The knob was flicking down hard against my hold. I could hear and feel something moving against the opposite side of the door. By the time security got down to me, I had the deadbolt in place, and the knob of the door was still now. I didn't understand why the security workers weren't taking me seriously while I explained the story, until I saw the playback from the cameras. It was just me outside. There was nothing there. I immediately thought this was a big prank on me, but everyone else genuinely thought that I was the one fooling them. Upon watching the footage a second time more closely, however, we noticed the way the door handle kept moving even when I removed my hand from it. Both the inside camera and outside caught it. We also noticed right before I panicked and turned to run inside, the fence made a slight jolt as if it was pushed. There were no holes in the fence or any kind of cuts made where somebody could squeeze through. There were no creepy shadows or unexplained wisps of smoke or light or movement besides those. Nobody there wanted to admit anything happened to me. Everyone came up with logical explanations like it was tricks of the moonlight, an overactive imagination, or too much coffee. I didn't want to argue about it. They already thought that I was being weird about it. I went about finishing my shift, but nobody used the back door again that night, and it remained locked. The longest employed security employee was finishing up his shift at the desk with me in the office that night. A few minutes before clocking out, he cleared his throat and told me, "I never really liked that north end. It feels like someone's eyes are always on me." It's honestly the most he's ever said to me in the years plus I worked there, the most I ever heard him say. I felt like the statement held even more weight from that alone. I worked there another 7 months and never had another incident. I never actually went out there again though. I stopped smoking, took my breaks out in the lobby, or wasted time chatting with coworkers. I made any excuse not to go out by that door again. I've never before or since had any moments where I felt like my imagination got the better of me, and I truly believe that wasn't the case here. I keep thinking back to that door handle jerking down when I was not touching it anymore. That had to be proof I wasn't imagining the whole thing. I worked overnight at a Subway inside a 24-hour truck stop, which wasn't the most glamorous job, but it kept the bills paid. Most of the time, it was quiet, especially after the regular truckers had eaten and left for the night. I was behind the counter one night, cleaning up some stuff, when this guy came in. He was just standing there staring at the menu, and then he asked me if I had a sandwich for him. At first, I thought he might have called in an order or something, so I asked him his name to look it up. That's when he stepped forward a bit, and I saw that he was covered in blood, soaked through his shirt, splattered his jeans, and dripping onto the floor. It was dark in the store, and I didn't realize how bad it was until I saw the red. It wasn't a little bit either. He was really covered in it. I froze for a second, and then he told me that I didn't need to know his name and to just make him a sandwich. I didn't want the guy to panic, so I tried to stay calm and think of the best way to notify someone. While making his sandwich, I thought of an excuse to go to the back of the store, saying that I needed to get more lettuce since the bin was almost done. I signaled to my other coworker who was relaxing in the back before her shift started to go get the off-duty state trooper who worked security around that time. A few minutes later, I saw the trooper finally coming into the store as I was finishing up with the man's sandwich. The trooper saw the trail of blood on the floor and the guy's stare, and it was obvious that something was seriously wrong. He must have had years of experience with things like this, because he moved in slow and steady, pretending he was just there for a sandwich, and got close. But the second he got close, the guy tensed up like he was about to bolt. The trooper stepped forward and grabbed him as the guy tried to pull away, but the trooper was faster. The man covered in blood was arrested and then questioned. The guy had been stabbed, but he didn't even know how bad it was because he was in shock. Apparently, he'd stabbed someone to death earlier that night, and the shock he had made him so disoriented he didn't even realize how badly he was bleeding. He had been driving around, gassing up his car at the pump just a few feet away, and getting food to go on the run. He was just some guy who walked in wanting a sandwich, acting like it was no big deal while covered in blood after a murder. It was a chilling experience for me having to deal with something like that while working a night shift job. Back in the 90s when I was in high school, I was very good with my hands and worked jobs like construction, demolition, flooring, and auto mechanics. One of the jobs I did was working for a guy doing remodeling projects, like at restaurants, bars, retail shops, and typical commercial projects. I went to school during the day, of course, and would sometimes work after school or weekends. For the guy I worked for, it wasn't uncommon for him to leave me alone at a site and have a list of things for me to do alone, mostly demolition work. He picked me up one Saturday morning as I didn't have a car or license yet, so he would pick me up and drive me to sites for work and then leave me alone there. I rarely worked with his other crews as they were the more skilled laborers, so I would tear up the place before the main crew would come in and do all the remodeling. Here's the part that was my major downfall to this story. I didn't pay attention to where we were going. I was too busy talking to him, and I think we were talking about cars or something. It took a long time to get to the site, and as we drove up, it was in the middle of nowhere in the Mojave Desert. I knew we left the highway and went down a few other 2-lane highways for a long distance, but I had no idea where we were. I had a big jug of water with me because the water to the house I would be working at was off. When we pulled up to the house, I pulled all my tools out of the truck before he left, and he then drove to another site that he would be working on. He told me that he would be back to pick me up at about 5 or 6 p.m., since it should only take me until then to do what I needed to do. That was always his way of saying, I'm only paying you till this time, so you better get everything done by then. It was never unfair, and we always had a good understanding on time and tasks. He drove away, and I was at this property all alone. I walked into the house, and it was mostly empty. My job was to remove all the remaining furniture, contents, and appliances, remove all the flooring, gut the kitchen and bathroom, and remove all the wood paneling. I was used to being on sites alone and working all night, and this was in the daytime on a Saturday, but the house kind of gave me the spooks. The house was old, dark, musty, and kind of cool inside, the kind of cool that gives you the goosebumps. I started removing all the junk from the house as I normally did on a project. I tore up all the flooring next, and to my delight, everything seemed to come up with ease, and it was rip, cut, and toss. I took a big demo hammer to the kitchen and tore it apart in less than an hour. I ended up using the big jug of water that my boss had given me to wash my hands and face periodically, so by late afternoon, I was down to my last drink and had already ate everything I brought. No worries though, because I would be getting picked up in a couple of hours. I finished all my tasks and even swept the entire place so the next crew could get right to work later that week. At that time of year when I was out there, it wasn't a typical hot desert day, but you know in the desert, as soon as the sun goes down, it starts to cool rapidly. I had a flannel shirt, but that wasn't enough, and it was starting to get dark. My ride was running late, so all I could do was wait. This was the time before cell phones were common, and there was no electricity, water, or phone service in the house. I climbed up to get to the top of the roof of the house to get a better look to see if I could see something in the distance. Miles down a smaller road, I saw a few homes, but those homes were all dark. My first thought was to hike down to a neighbor's house and ask them to use a phone. I didn't want to leave though in fear of missing my ride, especially since it didn't look like anyone was home since no lights were on in any houses. I started to think about my options as darkness approached fast. My options were either to stay at the house until morning, hike what little water I had a few miles in the desert at night, or wait until early morning and hike out there to some sort of civilization. I decided my best option was to just stay and hope that my ride would show up. It also suddenly occurred to me that no one knew where I was except my boss. I don't know if he told anyone else where I was either. My family wouldn't miss me until maybe Sunday night because they knew me and how much I would work, and they never worried about me not coming home. As full darkness was all around me, I didn't have a flashlight or any way to make a fire, but luckily the moonlight was bright. It was getting cold outside, so I went back inside the empty, creepy house that somehow seemed even more creepy when mostly empty. At about 8 p.m., the batteries on my radio, which was my only source of a little light and noise, started to die. I grabbed an old wooden chair and just sat in the living room of this house doing absolutely nothing except waiting. I started to hear the wind and odd noises, which I assumed were animals in the distance. I started to shiver from the cold, and my mind might have started to play tricks on me. I saw shadows moving outside and inside the house. I also started to hear someone talking, like whispers or something. I was sure I was going crazy and got up from my chair and yelled out hello, and just as I did, I heard something fall on the other side of the house. I had enough of this creepy house, so I went to go outside again. At least in the moonlight I could see better. Off in the distance I heard noises and saw movement, but couldn't make out anything. I had a pile of tools by the edge of the house ready for when my boss picked me up, so I ran over there and grabbed a heavy pry bar. I was ready to defend myself for whoever was out there. I had to keep moving, because my undershirt and flannel shirt were not enough to keep me warm. The wind was also starting to pick up, and as far as I could see, there was no lights around me. I didn't want to try to make it up on the house again out of fear of falling in the dark, but I got up on top of the gate just to try to gain a little bit of height to see if I could see some house lights nearby or car lights. My mind went to the stories that circled around at the time, about people who would come up to the Mojave Desert and bury bodies, how there were evil groups out here, and how people would go missing for no reason. Every noise had me on edge, and every shadow had my heart pounding. I knew no one was in the house, but I was sure I could hear noises from inside. I huddled up on the front porch for warmth, looking in the living room window, expecting to see someone at any moment. By around 11 p.m., I looked at my watch, thinking this was going to be a long night, as all this stuff only happened since it got dark. I didn't know how I was going to make it for another 6 hours until daybreak. Closer to midnight, I was wide awake. My eyes were only fixed on the dirt road, thinking that any time now a car would come down and maybe they could help me. I remember casually turning around to look back to the house, because all this time I kept hearing noises, but I told myself it was a rat or some animal. I saw a shadow of a person moving from the kitchen to down the hall. I jumped up from sitting and started backing my way out of the porch away from the house. As I was backing up, I tripped over the debris pile and fell down on the ground. I tried to get up, but fell again. It was like something pushed me down, or my imagination, but all of a sudden these bright lights were coming closer to me as I was laying on the ground. I saw my boss standing above me with a flashlight, wondering what I was doing on the ground. I was just so glad to see him. I wasn't mad. I just asked him what happened. He said that he was sorry, but he thought the other crew was coming to get me, and they thought he was coming, so no one actually came. He said it wasn't until later in the evening he asked the other crew leader about how far along the house I had got, and that's when they realized I was still out there. My boss felt really bad and told me he was going to pay me for the entire time I was out there. As he was driving me home, I asked about the house and told him how creepy it was. He said he didn't have any information on the house and only just knew what we were supposed to do. I don't know if I was going delusional or something, but that time I spent out there by myself, lost in the middle of the desert at night, was the scariest night of my life. What was so weird is I never saw any headlights of a car approaching. My only memory of being rescued was seeing my boss standing over me with his flashlight. I'm not exactly sure what happened that night, but it was so creepy. After that, I made sure to always keep extra batteries, a flashlight, and double the amount of liquid with me.
I grew up in a town where you didn't have to lock your bike or your back door. People waved at each other. You knew your neighbors, their dogs, even their routines. My whole elementary school experience was basically lived inside a single hallway. There were maybe 10 or 20 of us per grade, tops, and the same kids stuck around from 1st grade to 8th grade. We knew everything about one another, who got held back, whose parents were splitting up, who still wet the bed, even if nobody dared to say it aloud. We played baseball in the cul-de-sac, rode bikes behind the grocery store, took turns hosting birthday sleepovers with nothing but popcorn, surge, and a rented movie from that dirty old Planet Video. It was the 90s. Our lives revolved around Nintendo 64, Pogs, and who could do the best Jim Carrey impression. My parents trusted me, maybe too much. I was a latchkey kid by the 3rd grade, let myself in, microwaved a Hot Pocket, and watched whatever was on Fox Kids Block until they got home. I didn't get into much trouble. Most of us really didn't, there wasn't much to get into. Sleepovers, though, were how we marked time. Somebody's birthday meant Nerf wars, pizza, and fart jokes until somebody cried and puked. The houses were always safe, clean, and normal. Moms in fuzzy robes, dads who grilled hamburgers, old siblings who left us alone. That's just how it was. So when Mac Wallen invited the whole 6th grade crew over for his birthday sleepover, we all figured it'd be the same deal. A movie, maybe some late night junk food, somebody's hand in a bowl of warm water to see if they'd piss themselves. Because, well, that's just how they always go. Mac was new. He and his older brother Sam had moved into town that summer. Their house was in the dumpier part of the neighborhood where the roads weren't striped and half the lawns were just dirt patches. Sam was in 8th grade, but he didn't seem to like it. He was tall and greasy and had this mullet. All his shirts were missing sleeves and he had this twitch in his jaw like he was chewing something invisible. Even when he wasn't talking, he looked like he was about to spit. He didn't go out of his way to be mean, but nobody wanted to be near him. There was just something off about him. Mac, on the other hand, was different. Kind of funny, kind of crazy. A wild card. He'd say anything, try anything, and he didn't seem to care what people thought about him. That made him exciting in a way, especially to a bunch of bored 12-year-olds. He was like a free pass to mischief. Everybody wanted in on it. So when he handed out invitations, these cheap little printouts with monster trucks on them, we all said yes, of course. Every single last one of us. But of course, because you're listening to my story, we had no idea what we were walking into. We got off the bus late that Friday, backpacks slung over our shoulders, talking loud, acting tough. Mac was leading us onto the porch with that wide grin, crooked front teeth showing. His house, or maybe trailer, it was hard to tell, was sad low and sagging, like it had given up completely. There were 2 busted lawn chairs in the front and crushed beer cans sitting in the windowsill. One of the shutters hung by a single hinge. Sam stood there in the doorway, arms crossed, chewing on a toothpick. He didn't say anything, just watched us file inside, one by one. Inside, the place smelled like wet laundry and burnt grease. The living room carpet was a weird shade of gray that crunched when you stepped on it. Mac's mom came out from the kitchen, smiling at us. She had these sharp cheekbones and was wearing a skimpy pink tank top. No bra, nipples poking through, which made half the boys go red in the face. She handed out paper plates with cake already on them and said, "Y'all have fun tonight, okay?" Then disappeared back down the hall. A minute later, we heard a car door slam and then the rumble of an engine. Mac turned to us and said, "They're going to the bar. We got the whole house to ourselves." And for some reason, that didn't sit right with me. I'd never been left alone at a sleepover before, not without a parent at least within yelling distance. A few of the other boys hesitated too, looking at each other, but nobody said anything. No one wanted to be the baby that called their mom in the moment. And at first it was fine. Loud music, sugar, junk food. We played truth or dare, shot rubber bands at each other, tried to wrestle inside this cramped hallway. Sam hung around, not saying much, just grinning whenever somebody got hurt or fell too hard. Around 9, Max said he had something better than any kind of movie. He led us into the back room where he shared with Sam, pulled open a wooden chest by the bed. Inside that box were stacks of tapes, mostly unlabeled. Everyone immediately started hooting and nudging at each other. He slid a tape into the VCR and turned the little TV on. The screen filled with grainy footage. Somebody was filming in a bedroom, shaky cam style. And right away I knew it wasn't a movie. It was real. Mac's mom was on the bed, totally naked. Hair longer than, but definitely her. His dad, or somebody who looked like him, was standing behind her. And they weren't alone. A few of the boys laughed nervously, but the room had gone cold. No one was really breathing anymore. Sam stood behind us, arms crossed, and watched us watch the movie. "You like that, huh?" he said. "My dad used to tape everything." I wanted to leave right then, but I didn't know how to say it. Mac was grinning like it was just a joke. "That's just one of them. You want to see the rest?" He held up another tape in front of us. "No, dude, we're good," somebody muttered, but it was drowned out completely. Next came the toys, pulled out of a drawer in the nightstand inside their parents' room. Rubbery, oily things that smelled faintly of latex and sweat. One looked like a dog toy dipped in Vaseline. Mac tossed it to one of the boys who caught it and dropped it like it was on fire. And just when we thought we'd hit the bottom, Sam pulled out this small wooden box from underneath the bed. He clicked it open and inside was a revolver. Real, heavy, and shiny. The metal looked clean, like it'd been oiled recently. He held it up and said, "This is my dad's. Ain't it beautiful?" He pointed it at the ceiling first and then at one of the boys. "Bang," he said really quickly and loud. Everybody flinched. Mac laughed like we were a bunch of girls. "It's not loaded," he said, but his voice cracked when he said it. Sam walked around the room, slow pressing the barrel against foreheads, one after the other. I could feel my stomach folding in on itself. The boy next to me was shaking. When the gun got to me, I couldn't move, I couldn't breathe. Then I felt that cold metal kiss my skin. Sam grinned at me, clicked the hammer back, and then whispered, "What if?" And then he moved on. After that, the night completely had turned. The games stopped being games, and Sam kicked the family dog, a scruffy, sick-looking mutt named Jagger, right in the ribs for barking loud. Mac caught this mouse in a shoebox, then dumped it down the garbage disposal. Somebody said don't, but it was too late. The whir of the machine, the sound it made, it was blended alive. We all stood there just watching silently. Sam opened up the microwave and pulled out this small garden snake out of an old fish tank. Mac was laughing, but his eyes didn't match. They looked flat, almost like he wasn't really there. I turned away though. I didn't want to watch this one. The last straw came when they lit the neighbor's trash can on fire. We all crept outside trying to be quiet, but Sam was spraying lighter fluid and giggling to himself. The flame shot up fast, and he danced around it, bare feet on the pavement. I looked at the rest of the boys. One was crying, one looked like he was ready to throw up. The fun was gone, long gone. This wasn't even mischief anymore. This wasn't even rebellion. It was pure madness to me. I slipped back inside and grabbed my backpack, laced up my shoes with my shaking hands. My heart was pounding so loud I couldn't hear anything else. I opened up the front door, stepped off into the dark, and didn't look back. Not even once. The streetlights buzzed overhead. The night felt endless, and I just started walking. I didn't run, even though I wanted to. Every part of me screamed to just get away from there fast, but I didn't. I walked, one foot in front of the other, all the way down that cracked sidewalk, past parked cars and silent houses with normal lives behind the curtains. I think I even whispered the Lord's Prayer at some point, or maybe it was just some song that I'd heard on the radio. My brain didn't feel like it was working right. It felt like the world had shifted slightly now, like everything was tilted, off-center and shameful. My house was 8 blocks away, and each block felt like a mile itself. Every gust of wind made me flinch, and I kept thinking Sam was behind me the whole time, or Mac, or even worse, somebody had followed me out of the TV screen, something from that grainy, grimy tape. Some man with a camera and a mask and a laugh like gravel. I made it home just after 11. My parents were in the living room watching the news. My mom was knitting and my dad was drinking tea. I opened up the door and stepped inside, and they looked up like I was just back from prison. My mom immediately said, "What's wrong?" I didn't answer. I dropped my backpack and just stood there. I must have looked like hell because she was off the couch and at my side in seconds. "Honey, what's wrong?" I started crying, not loud or blubbering, just quiet, whole body. My dad stood up confused, and I couldn't get the words out fast enough. I told him about the gun, about the tapes, about the dog, the snake, the fire. I told him everything except for the parts that I didn't fully understand. The way Sam looked at us, the way Mac laughed without even blinking or thinking twice. My mom held me so tight I could barely breathe. My dad turned the TV off and just said nothing for a really long time. The next morning, everything happened pretty quick. My parents called the school called the police, and a couple of the other boys' parents had already called in too. Apparently, one of the kids ran home in the middle of the night. Another one woke up screaming. It didn't take long for the Wallen place to be crawling with cops. I didn't go to school that day. None of us did, actually. Rumors flew around fast, and Sam got sent away, Mac got suspended. Their parents were under investigation for all kinds of things. The tapes were confiscated, so was the gun. Animal control took the dog, though I doubt he lived much longer after that night. The Wallens didn't stick around as well. A for sale sign went up the next week, and by the time Halloween had rolled around, the house was already boarded up. Nobody moved in after them either. Last I heard, it got condemned a few years later, torn down and then replaced by a strip of gravel and weeds. Nothing grows there now either. Makes me wonder if anything else happened there. My friends and I didn't really talk about it much after this, not really. Everybody who was there that night, me and the other boys, we stayed close for a while after. I guess trauma kind of does that to you. But by the end of the 8th grade, things had changed. A few moved away, a few fell in with rougher crowds, and one kid got picked up for theft his junior year. Saw in the paper. No one was the same after that night. As for me, I turned quiet, still went to school, obviously, still smiled in my pictures, but something in me curled up and died that night. I don't do sleepovers anymore. I don't go to parties. I don't trust anybody who talked way too much shit. I always check my doors. I always listen for the click of a lock. I became a bit of a hermit, and honestly, I kind of prefer it this way. I only ever went to one sleepover in my entire life. One. And that was plenty. It wasn't like my parents were super strict or even religious or anything. They just wanted to know the people that I was staying with, and after what happened that night, they made damn sure I never stayed the night at anybody's house again. It was 5th grade. The kid was Tommy Jurgens. Ooh. Everybody liked Tommy. He was this little wiry dude with a loud mouth and this fake confidence that somehow worked for him. He knew every cheat code for every PlayStation game and could spit like 8 feet straight up in the air, then catch it back with his mouth. That kind of kid. Yeah, baby. We thought he was cool, but we didn't really know Tommy, not the way we thought we did. It turns out most of what made him cool was just him being raised by a pack of absolute lunatics. We'd see hints occasionally, like how he never brought lunch, just dollar bills and scratchers, or how he said these weird grown-up things. Stuff like, "My mom's old man just got out again," or "Uncle Mike's got court in Flagstaff." All that kind of skated over our heads back then, just Tommy being Tommy. He'd been in our class since 2nd grade, and even though he didn't have a ton of close friends, we all wanted to be around him. His life just seemed electric and different. So when he handed out birthday invites on a notebook paper, drawn in Sharpie and riddled with spelling mistakes, I still said yes without even asking my folks first. They weren't thrilled when I showed them, but Tommy's name rang a familiar enough bell that they gave in. I think my mom called his mom and talked for a full 90 seconds before saying it was okay. "All right, but if anything feels off," she said, "you can call us. I mean it." That Friday came. We were all rolled out the bus, hyped out of our minds. Tommy lived on the edge of town in this saggy house with 4 trucks parked out front and 2 boats in the yard. Neither seemed to be seaworthy though. Their garage was open, and I swear to God there was already a drum kit being set up. Real drums. A couple of guys carrying amps inside. We hadn't even taken off our backpacks yet either. Tommy met us on the porch with that usual grin and said, "You guys are gonna lose your freaking minds." And he wasn't lying. I remember walking in and thinking it was more like a party at my uncle's house than a birthday thing. There were adults already there, friends of Tommy's parents, I guess, all drinking and smoking and hanging out in the living room, laughing and didn't take notice of us at all. There were stacks of beer on top of the kitchen table, and the hallway smelled like somebody had burnt popcorn and covered it with weed smoke. Still, in the moment, I think we were just far too young to process what was wrong. At first, it just seemed like chaos. Loud music, cold sodas, big yard. We honestly figured that we stepped into the coolest birthday ever, but we had no idea. The backyard was the size of a football field, or at least it felt like it. There was a rusted trampoline with a bent leg that tilted to one side when more than 2 kids jumped on it, and somebody had duct taped an old dartboard to the trunk of a dying mesquite tree. The ground was patchy dirt and crabgrass, with empty beer cans littering the corners. A cooler full of orange sodas and RC Cola sat in the middle like a prize, and everybody tore into it. Then the band showed up, and I'm not kidding, an actual local band. 4 dudes in ripped jeans and dark sunglasses, lugging gear across the lawn onto a piece of plywood propped up on cinder blocks. One of them wore a vest with no shirt underneath, called themselves Code 3, and the lead singer yelled, "Let's wake this town up," inside a mic and screeched that made all the dogs in the neighborhood bark immediately. They kicked it off with "You Give Love a Bad Name," and every 5th grader in that backyard lost their minds. Even the shy kids were pogoing like it was a real concert. We were 11 years old, drinking sodas, hurling darts at a tree, and listening to a live Bon Jovi cover band, while a drunk guy that we'd never met grilled hot dogs on the porch. It was insane and also kind of amazing. As the sun dipped and the bug zapper came to life, the mood shifted though. The adults were getting sloppy. They weren't just a few beers deep anymore. There were bottles of liquor going now. I saw a guy pour something clear into a red Solo cup and then stumble into the garage. Inside, a few of the other guys, dudes in their 20s I guess, were playing darts for money, real cash laid out on a washing machine like a poker table. Tommy's dad, or the guy that we thought was his dad, was this thick, sweaty guy in cargo shorts with a big chain around his neck. He was barking at somebody named Shane about cheating. "You crossed the line, you dumb shit. I saw you," he said. Shane was this lanky, red-faced, holding a dart like he was about to throw it into somebody's eye. They had a second dartboard in the garage where the grown-ups were playing. We were all just standing there. I remember one of the kids, Tyler, saying, "Should we get out of here?" Before we could move, though, Shane threw the dart at the board and missed it completely. It thunked into the wall, and that's when Tommy's dad shoved him hard. Shane staggered, knocked over a milk crate of tools, and then came up swinging. The next 10 seconds were pure noise. Metal clattering, fist hitting meat, glass breaking. One guy got slammed into a water heater so hard it sounded like a gunshot. We just stood there, frozen. A few kids even started crying. The fight broke up after Tommy's mom, who'd been chain smoking on the back porch, came in and screamed at both of them to knock it off. She had this voice like salt and vinegar. I watched her dig her nails into Tommy's dad's arm and then drag him out by his very skin. "Party's back on," she slurred, and the band started another song like nothing had even happened. After that, the lines between what was fun and what was wrong began to blur really quickly. They busted out drugs not long after. Not weed in a discreet little joint either. We're talking actual drugs. A coffee table in the living room got cleared off, and Tommy's mom dumped out a sandwich bag full of greenish bud and what looked like a literal pile of white powder. It was almost like watching a movie. I thought it was flour at first, but it definitely wasn't. Some guy named Zeke started chopping it up with a Blockbuster card. I remember him saying, "Don't worry, this ain't coke, it just got some go fast," like it made it okay. Another adult, I think Tommy's aunt, was lighting up a glass pipe and singing along to Panama. Tommy came walking in the garage with this big stupid grin and a joint in his mouth, like it was candy. We all just stared at him and nobody said a word. "Dude, hit this," he said, offering it up to Cody Anderson. Cody shook his head and stepped back like it was a snake. Tommy just shrugged and took another puff. He coughed like a dying animal and laughed until he fell over. At that point, I was still having fun in this weird, high-wire way. We'd snuck into an R-rated movie, and now we were holding our breath, hoping to not get caught. It was insane, yeah, but it didn't feel dangerous, at least not yet. We ended up in the backyard, sitting on lawn chairs, drinking warm soda, and watching Code 3 finish their last set. The adults were blitzed, falling over, laughing, forgetting their own kind of name drunk. Somebody was dry heaving in the bushes, too. I was telling a ghost story to the other kids when we heard yelling again, same voices as before. Tommy's dad and, of course, Shane. "You shorted me," somebody screamed. "Nah, you just fucking suck at darts, Shane." Then another crash, a scream, and people running. We all stood up. A couple of kids took off toward the side yard. The rest of us crept around the garage, doing our best to be quiet. I could already feel the air shift, the way everything got really quiet really quickly. Shane was on the ground, blood on his shirt. Tommy's dad had a knife in one hand, still open. Not a kitchen knife either, one of those folding ones with a knuckle guard. Shane was moaning and gripping his side. Then somebody screamed. And then, bang, bang, bang. 3 shots, real ones, close and deafening. Screaming erupted everywhere. Tommy's mom was laying on the lawn crying. One of the band guys had tackled the dude with the gun and then got it away from him. No one got hit, thank God, but there were shell casings on the ground. The spell was now broken, though. This wasn't a party anymore. It was a war zone. The cops showed up in under 10 minutes, sirens blaring, lights throwing red and blue across the lawn like a crime scene disco. I was still in the backyard, clutching my shoes and shaking so bad I could barely even untie the laces. Cody Anderson was crying and wouldn't stop saying over and over, "Did we just get shot at?" They herded us onto the sidewalk, told us to sit down and not to move. The neighbors were outside now, talking to the officers, pointing at the house like it was all normal. A woman wrapped up in a blanket asked me if I was okay. I just nodded back, but I wasn't, not even close. Parents started showing up, headlights rolling down the street one after another. My mom's face when she spotted me, I'll never forget it. She didn't even ask questions. She just wrapped me up in her arms and held me like I just came back from war. Tommy's dad got cuffed and loaded up into a cruiser. Shane got hauled off into an ambulance. conscious but bleeding through a wad of paper towels somebody had slapped on his ribs. A few other adults were questioned right there in the driveway. One guy took off before the cops could even get his name, just vanished off into the night with a backpack full of God knows what. We didn't end up going back to school on Monday, and neither did Tommy. Rumors, of course, flew around. The gun was stolen, the white powder was meth. One of the band members was an ex-con. I didn't care, I just wanted to forget it all, but honestly, I couldn't. None of us could. My mom told the school I wasn't allowed to sleep over at anybody's house again. "Not until you're out of my house and paying your own bills," she said to me, and that was that. I didn't argue. Last I heard, Tommy and his family had moved down the globe to somewhere near Yuma. He never came back. And just like I said at the beginning, I never stayed the night at another kid's house again. Truckers have rules. Some are written and some aren't. And one of these unwritten ones is that you never trust a shortcut at night. Roads that save you 30 minutes in daylight can cost you everything once the sun goes down. And I broke that rule. I was running late, behind schedule, and the GPS swore this country road was gonna shave half an hour off my route. I've been driving 14 hours straight. Eyelids were now heavy, coffee not doing much but souring my gut. I told myself 30 minutes was definitely worth it, as well as telling myself that the machine knew better than me. The turnoff was easy to miss, just this sagging sign for a farm-to-market road, half buried in the weeds. The asphalt was cracked, striping long gone. I slowed and swung my rig onto it, and watched the highway disappear in my mirrors. In those first few miles, it was absolutely fine, empty but fine. Fields of corn leaning in like they wanted to listen. Half-lit farmhouses here and there, a rusted barn occasionally as well. Then the road began to narrow. Asphalt gave way to dirt. My headlights bounced over ruts, dust curling up in the beams. Trees were crowding closer, blotting out the sky. I gripped my wheel tighter, telling myself that I'd be back on the main highway soon enough. The GPS still showed that blue line ahead, urging me forward. And that's when I saw the first one, this old Buick, stripped down to its frame, sunk in the ditch with weeds growing through the windows. A mile later, a pickup with no doors, its cab peppered with bullet holes. Another mile or two and there was two SUVs now, gutted like fish, resting nose to nose in the trees. Okay, it's a vehicle dumping ground. Rural folks leave junk everywhere. But my throat was dry and my stomach was telling me that this wasn't just junk. These were leftovers. The dirt track dipped off into the hollow, and that's when I saw the first glow, orange flickering like a campfire. As I came around the bend, the beams of my headlights caught them. 3 figures standing around a barrel fire in the middle of the road. Shadows were stretched along and sharp across the dirt. They didn't scatter like deer, they didn't wave at me like farmers or hunters. They just stood there, watching, hands at their sides, fire lighting up their faces. They didn't really look surprised to see me at all. I downshifted and slowed my rig, and one of them stepped forward. He had something long in his hand. It was metal and caught the firelight. A crowbar maybe, or maybe a rifle. It was hard to tell. My heart began slamming in my chest, and the GPS line still said continue straight, but I knew damn well this wasn't a road anymore. This was a trap. I kept the rig crawling, engine primed, headlights washing over the 3 of them like they were part of the road itself. None of them flinched, didn't move either, just stared at me. One with the metal rod, shifting in his weight, and then lifted it slightly, and I finally saw what it actually was. A length of pipe, capped on one end. Not a tool, but definitely a weapon. Every instinct screamed at me to swing wide, gun it, blast past them. But the road was far too narrow, the ditch was extremely deep, and the trees were pressing in tightly. If I tried to swerve, I'd jackknife the trailer, and that would be the end of me. The guy in the middle raised his hand like a cop signaling to stop. My headlights painted his face. He wasn't old, maybe mid-20s. His eyes were flat and greasy, like he wasn't fully there. That kind of stare that tells you he's already decided what's about to happen. I braked slowly, praying this was just some kind of local screwing with me. My hands slipped on the wheel, my palms were sweating. It was almost so bad that it felt like oil. And that's when the others began to move as well, from the tree line. More shadows peeled off. 4, maybe 5 of them. They slipped into the ditches and then climbed the berms, boots crunching, all moving toward my rig now. Trap confirmed. I shifted back up, revving the engine hard. The guy with the pipe stepped closer, right into the glow of my brights. He pointed the pipe at my windshield like he was sighting me in. Then I saw him smirk. And that smirk absolutely broke me. I stomped the accelerator and the rig screamed, diesel roaring as I barreled forward. He didn't jump clear, he actually braced, like he was gonna stop 40 tons of steel with his own body. I didn't have time to consider his insanity. I watched him vanish underneath my grill, felt the sickening bump of impact rattle through the cab, and then was past the fire. The barrel rolled, sparks spilling across the dirt, but it wasn't over yet. The figure scrambled on both sides. One leapt at the steps of the cab, hand slapping the metal, another smashing something against my trailer. The sound of breaking glass was exploding behind me. The rear marker lights had now shattered. I kept the pedal buried though. The dirt road twisted, my rig bouncing hard, but I still didn't lift my foot. The branches clawed at either side of the trailer, snapping like gunfire. The mirrors showed chaos behind me, the fire now shrinking, shadows darting. Somebody running after me with arms pumping like pistons. Then, headlights flared up behind me. And not just one set, 2, maybe 3. Engines gunned, tires sprayed dirt, and suddenly, I was no longer the hunter, I was the prey. They were in vehicles that I had not seen parked, hidden somewhere deeper in the trees waiting. The GPS blue line was useless now, frozen, spinning, and recalculating. I didn't need it to tell me what I already knew. I had miles of dirt track ahead of me, and a pack behind me. The Crown Vic from earlier, a battered pickup, and something else low-slung with a screaming engine. They came in fast and reckless, almost like they'd done this chase 100 times before. My trailer fishtailed and mud sprayed. I fought the wheel and felt the back tires bite again. My whole world shrank into a tunnel of my headlights and vibrating wheel in my hands. And then, the first shot rang out. Glass exploded on the passenger side, a spider web cracking across the lower pane. My ears rang, and somebody had fired from the pickup, very close now, headlights blinding in my mirror. I ducked low, keeping one hand on the wheel, and jerked the rig left, then right. The trailer rocked, tires screamed. One of them overcommitted. I think the Crown Vic clipped the ditch and flipped, sparks and steel tumbling in my rear view. But the others continued coming. Another shot, closer. A hole punched through the passenger mirror now, the glass raining down in shards. I swore loudly, shifted down, then redlined the engine. The road then suddenly opened up into this wide stretch, fields on either side, no trees. Moonlight turned the dirt silver. Then I spotted a sign half buried in the weeds. County road ends, bridge out. My stomach dropped. I couldn't stop, not with them behind me. The bridge was nothing more than this rotted span across a shallow creek. I saw it in the last second. Half the planks were gone, support beams sagging. But it was too late. I hit it doing 50. My trailer shuddered, wood splintered like bone. And for a second I was airborne, stomach in my throat. And then the front tires slammed the dirt on the other side. Metal screamed, sparks lit up, but somehow, by some miracle, the trailer didn't shear off. Behind me, that pickup wasn't so lucky. It hit the gap far too slow, and the front end cleared, but the back axle snapped, dragging it down nose first into that creek bed. One engine still screamed. The low-slung car had made it across, fishtailing wildly, still chasing. Headlights swerved, drawing closer and closer until it pulled up alongside me. I saw the driver now, close enough to smell oil and cigarettes through that busted-out window. His face was painted with something, black streaks under his eyes like war paint. He was screaming something that I couldn't hear, and it sounded like some kind of cry. Then he jerked his wheel toward me. Metal slammed metal, my cab rattled, and I fought the wheel and pushed back. The two of us locked in this deadly dance at 50 miles an hour. He tried again, slamming into me, only this time I was ready. I jerked left, forcing him into the ditch. His headlights veered, his car tipped, then he was gone, rolling and flipping, steel shrieking as it tore itself apart. Silence only followed me now, only my engine was the only thing making noise. I kept the pedal down, heart still jackhammering, hands shaking so bad I could still even grip the wheel. Then the GPS chimed in, calm as anything. rejoining highway in 2 miles. I almost laughed. Almost. 2 miles never felt so far in my life, and that dirt track bucked under my tires, each rut threatening to snap an axle. Every single shadow out in those fields twitching like it wanted to step out onto the road. My ears were ringing from the gunshots, and my hands were now welded to that wheel. I continued checking the mirrors, waiting to see more headlights reappear, waiting for another engine to scream up behind me, but there was nothing, just black fields and broken fences under the moonlight. The GPS purred like it hadn't just tried to feed me to the wolves. In 1 mile, turn left. When I saw the highway again glowing faint under the moonlight, I could have cried. Pavement, civilization, lifeline. I hit the turn so fast my tires were squealing, trailer tipping dangerously before it slammed back down. I shot back onto the interstate like I'd been launched from a cannon. 60, 70, 80. I didn't care, I'm not stopping. But adrenaline really will only last for so long. After 10 minutes of white-knuckle driving, I eased back, checked my gauges, and listened for anything wrong with my rig. The grill was bent, one mirror was gone, and the marker lights were busted, but she was still running, still alive. Unlike them. I pulled into a truck stop 45 minutes later. Lights bright, pumps humming, people inside, real people. I parked crooked and staggered out of my cab, then went straight to the bathroom to splash some cold water on my face. The reflection that looked back at me was pale, eyes wide, pupils like pinholes. My shirt was completely soaked in sweat. I didn't call the cops, didn't even tell another driver. What would I really say? That a gang in the middle of woods tried to hunt me down on a dirt road that my GPS told me to take? That I ran a man down with 40 tons of steel just to make it out alive? I really doubt that anybody would believe me. And even if they did, out here in the middle of nowhere, it wouldn't really matter. I got back in my rig, hands still gently shaking, and I made a promise to myself. Never again. Never trust the blue line. Never take a road that you don't know. But occasionally late at night when the interstate goes empty and the CB chatter dies out, I still will think about that shortcut, about those stripped cars rusting in ditches, the barrel fire lighting up the trees, and that smirk on that kid's face before I hit him. Gravel crunches under the tires as I ease down that last stretch of a dirt road. The air thins out up here. Pine trees crowd the hillsides. Dark water spreads wide and flat up ahead. The reservoir, nobody else around. That's good. I kill the engine and my daughter kicks her door open before I've even unbuckled my seatbelt. She's got the tackle box in one hand, the rod in the other, already marching up to the shoreline, 15 years old and impatient as hell. I grab the cooler and the net and then follow her down the slope. The water is cold. A breeze ripples across it, carrying the creak of the pines. I scan the bank, the sand, the rocks, and the brush. Quiet. Too quiet maybe, but I guess that's really what we came for. Just us, no crowds, no phones, no other buzzing. I glance over and see a tent, half collapsed, staked right at the edge of the water, maybe about 15 yards down. No car, no boots outside, just nylon sagging, door flap open, shadows inside it. Somebody else beat us to it, my daughter says. She sounds annoyed. I tell her not to worry, place is big enough for two. But I feel my stomach shift. Tent looks all wrong, like it's been there for quite some time. We end up settling a little ways off, and she sets up quick, hooks her bait, and casts out into the water. The bobber plunks and drifts off. I unpack the cooler, crack open a soda, and just try to shake off the unease in the air. Then I take note of the tackle box that's near that tent. It's not ours, just sitting in the dirt, lid open, lures spilling out like teeth. Hey, I call out to my daughter, nodding toward it. You see that? She follows my gaze and then frowns. Yeah, weird. We continue fishing anyway. Time drags on, but no bites. And throughout that time, I keep glancing over at the tent, waiting for somebody to crawl out, to stretch, to wave, to do something, but nothing happens. The flap just flutters in the wind and the whole thing sags a little lower. The sun slowly slides down the back of the ridge. The air cools fast. I row us out in that inflatable dinghy. My daughter balanced in the front, line trailing in the water. "Dad?" she says. Her voice makes me turn quickly. She's pointing down. Beneath us, maybe 10 feet below, the headlights glowing dull and green. A car, submerged doors open, weeds waving out like hair. The reflection ripples across the surface, lighting up her now pale face. I grip the oars, throat's now dry. My first thought, an accident. Somebody drove off the road. My second thought, it's been down there for a while. Where the hell is the report? Where the hell are the people? The breeze then dies and the water flattens. And that's when he steps out of the tree line. Barefoot, clothes dripping wet, sticking to his skin, moving slowly and steadily down toward that tent. He sees us. Then he starts walking straight into the reservoir. I dig the oars deep, water slapping against the dinghy, plastic flexing underneath us. My daughter twists around, eyes wide, as she watches him. He continues though, he doesn't stop. The man wades out, knees, thighs, waist, water black around him. He doesn't really swim, he doesn't break stride. He just kind of keeps walking, shoulders rolling slow. "Dad, go!" I yank harder, the oars bite. The dinghy skates across the surface, but I still hear him, water churning behind us. He's not fast at all, but he is steady. His face is pale, his lips pulled in tight, teeth clenched, eyes wide and fixed on us. He keeps staring at us like we're already caught. The boat drags and something snags underneath us. I look down. Weed or rope, I can't tell. I yank an oar free and jab at it, and my daughter screams. He's gotten closer now, waist deep, shoulders breaking the water. He still hasn't slowed down. He actually snags my daughter's fishing line and starts yanking on her rod. "Cut the line," I shout to her. Her rod's still out, line stretching taut. She fumbles, hands shaking, knife scraping out of the tackle box. She saws at it, plastic wheel whining. Snap and the line breaks. I slam both oars, dig deep, and the boat lurches free, shoots forward. I don't stop. My arms burn and my chest feels like it's about to split open. Then I glance back and he's gone. The water ripples. Empty. I spin the dinghy searching. The tent on shore sagging in black, pines hissing with the wind, but there's nothing on the bank. "Where is he?" my daughter whispers. And then the dinghy jolts, a hard knock from below it. We both scream and I almost lose the oars. Another thud, harder this time, shaking the boat. Water splashes over the side. He's under us. "Move!" she cries to me. I row blind, wild. The boat jerks forward, then stalls again, and something scrapes the bottom. Nails on plastic. The dinghy rocks hard, and she clutches onto the side. A hand then bursts up through the water, pale and slick, fingers crawling at the rim of the boat. Nails were blue, skin wrinkled like it'd been soaking in it for weeks. I swing, and the oar smashes down, the crack of wood on bone, and the hand slips under and vanishes quickly. The boat spins, my daughter's sobbing. I row harder, every stroke sloppy and desperate. The shoreline draws closer and closer, 10 feet, then 5, and I hit gravel. She leaps out, scrambling up on the bank. I drag the dinghy halfway out, chest heaving, heart pounding in my skull. The water settles and silence follows. The tent hangs limp beside us, flap open like a mouth. "Get to the truck," I pant. I shove her ahead and glance back over my shoulder. The reservoir is glass, no ripples and no sign of that man. We sprint uphill and my boots slip on the shale, my lungs tearing open. The truck glows in the sunlight, our salvation. I fumble with the keys in my pocket. My daughter's already clawing at the handle and she yanks open the door, hauls herself inside. I jam the key twist and engine coughs and sputters and won't catch. Come on, come on. And then I hear it, another sound behind us, the slap of bare feet onto gravel, slow and steady, getting closer and closer. When I look up in the mirror, he's there. walking up the center of the dirt road, soaked clothes hanging, hair plastered to his skull. His smile still hasn't changed. His hands hang limp, swinging easy. The truck engine coughs again and dies. My daughter is full out crying now, rocking in her seat. I slam the key again and pump the pedal, praying. The man keeps walking, 10 yards, 9, 8, and finally, the engine roars to life. I slam it into reverse, tires spitting out gravel. My headlights wash over him. He doesn't flinch, doesn't raise a hand, just walks straight into the beam. I floor it. The truck shoots backward, gravel spraying and then spins, fishtailing onto the track. My daughter rips out another scream and clutches the dash. I stomp the gas and the reservoir vanishes. Pines whip by, black and endless. I don't look in the mirror, not even once. But I swear, even over the engine's roar, I can still hear those footsteps on gravel keeping pace. I don't lift my foot, and the truck screams up that dirt road, bouncing hard enough to rattle our teeth. Branches lash at the windows, gravel spits under the tires. My daughter curled up against the seat, fists in her hair, sobbing uncontrollably. The road then curves, straightens, and dips, and I keep it pinned, 80 on a track built for 20. The wheel jerks and tries to tear from my grip, but I hang on. Slowly, the reservoir falls away behind us, black water, blacker trees, and I tell myself, it's gone, it's done. But my skin says differently. My skin says, he's still there. I risk one look into the rear view, but there's nothing, just dust hanging in the air. I want to believe it, but the steering wheel shakes under my hands, and I realize it's not the road, it's me. I'm the one shaking that hard. When we finally hit pavement, it was a miracle. The truck surges onto the country road, tires screaming, and then grips solid. My chest caves with relief, and my daughter finally looks up, tears streaking across her face, lips trembling. "Is he gone?" she whispers to me. I want to tell her yes, God, I want to, but the word dies off in my throat. Headlights bloom up ahead, oncoming, a sedan silver creeping slowly. It flashes its brights once, then twice. I ease the truck right, hands slippery on the wheel. The sedan doesn't pass, it slows and it pulls in behind us. My daughter sees it too, her nails digging into my arm. The car stays back, just far enough that the headlights blur, and just close enough that we can't forget it's there. As I press harder on the gas, the sedan matches me, and we ride like that for miles and miles, me pushing 80, it shadowing us, no closer, no further, just locked in. Then, just as suddenly as it appeared, it turns off, no signal, no brake lights, just gone off into a dirt cut, swallowed up quickly by the trees around it. Silence fills the cab, and my daughter slumps against the door, completely spent. I grip the wheel until my knuckles ache, and I'm just afraid if I let go, everything will unravel. We don't stop. Not until we hit town and file up a police report. The car is found in the water, no bodies, and no suspects.